And his father informed him that there was submarine activity below the ice, that they were tunneling to get underneath. A lot of people don't realize that
NASA's new ANITA program has detected bizarre, unexplained radio signals emerging from beneath Antarctica's ice. Some defy known physics, hinting at possible alien origins or unknown particles interacting deep within Earth's frozen depths. And if you couple that with new information leaked by whistleblowers, we have on our hands something extraordinary. A recent high-altitude balloon mission, ANITA, the Antarctic Impulsive Transient Antenna, has done the unthinkable. It's detected radio pulses not from space, but from deep below the ice, climbing at steep angles that shouldn't exist. These are radio bursts rising 30 degrees beneath the horizon, signals that, according to our best physics, ought to be impossible. ANITA is designed to detect ultra-high energy neutrinos, ghost particles that pass through entire planets without a whisper. But even these elusive particles can't emerge from the Earth's crust with the force that ANITA observed. And here's the kicker. This has happened multiple times. Sharp, upward-facing signals, caught not once, but again and again. And when scientists tried to cross-check the events with IceCube, the massive neutrino detector buried beneath the South Pole, they found nothing. Silence. As if these signals are slipping past every conventional explanation. So what's going on? Some believe these are echoes of new physics, interactions that could involve dark matter, undiscovered particles, or even higher dimensional phenomena. One bold idea? That these are sterile neutrinos, a theoretical kind of particle that doesn't interact with matter or light as we know it. Others point to CPT violation, a break in the symmetry of time and space itself. But there's another possibility, one that's not theoretical, one that's not in the textbooks, and that's where the whistleblower comes in. A former contractor for Raytheon, the defense giant that runs key infrastructure at the South Pole, has stepped forward with claims that take this mystery to the next level. In a recorded interview, he describes a base operating under layers of secrecy. Yes, there are scientists. Yes, there are weather stations and neutrino labs. But there are also off-limits zones, nighttime operations, and equipment deliveries that didn't match the manifest. He describes watching cargo, sealed, unmarked, being moved with urgency under cover of polar storms. Staff were told to stay indoors. External cameras were blacked out. The excuse? Routine upgrades. But the timing? Aligned exactly with ANITA's detections. Something changed after those signals, he said. Suddenly, areas were restricted. Flights were redirected. Civilians were rotated out. I've worked high-clearance contracts before. That wasn't science. That was military. He claims that personnel from unknown branches of government, wearing no insignia, arrived and worked in teams separate from regular researchers. He overheard mentions of directed energy systems, geophysical scanning, and, most bizarrely, harmonic amplification. And perhaps strangest of all, a project nicknamed simply the Vault. Some have dismissed these claims as conspiracy-fueled fantasy, but others aren't so sure, because throughout history, Antarctica has been surrounded by secrecy and myth. Ancient maps, like the Piri Reis, appear to depict the continent centuries before its official discovery, complete with details of an ice-free coastline. Operation High Jump in 1946 sent thousands of US troops to the frozen south for reasons still debated. And Nazi expeditions to Neuschwabenland remain shrouded in mystery, with rumors of subterranean tunnels, hidden bases, and contact with something non-human. Could the anomalous ANITA signals be echoes of ancient technologies buried under the ice? Could they be tapping into something not just extraterrestrial, but ultra-terrestrial? There's growing speculation that what ANITA detected wasn't a particle at all, but a signal, a message, or a burst of energy from deep underground, not caused by neutrinos from the cosmos, but by something moving beneath the continent. Because here's what no one's explaining. Those upward moving signals? They seem to follow no known trajectory, no origin point in the sky, no predictable pattern. Some physicists have even joked that they're coming from the Earth's core, only half joking. And now, as the PUEO mission prepares to launch, a more sensitive successor to ANITA, the world waits. Will it confirm the impossible? Will it unravel the truth? Or will it be silenced, like so many stories from Antarctica before it? Because the deeper you go, the more the ice seems to whisper. Of physics gone rogue, of secrets buried for centuries, of signals rising where none should be, and of the chilling possibility that someone or something is trying to reach us from below. In 1963, deep in the Ross Sea, an American icebreaker, the USS Edisto, stumbles upon something extraordinary. A massive iceberg drifts silently across the horizon, 9 stories high. Nothing unusual until the lookout spots it. Halfway up the pristine white face, a smear, a dark, unnatural scar in the ice. The ship inches closer. What at first looks like debris soon reveals itself as something far stranger. Enormous wooden beams, canvas tarps fluttering in the polar wind, and 4 thick telephone poles jutting straight out of the ice. It isn't wreckage, it's a structure. But whose? Could this be the lost camp of legendary explorer Admiral Richard Byrd? Or something far more secretive? Back in 1940, just a few miles inland on the Ross Ice Shelf, Byrd built his 3rd Antarctic base, Little America 3. This wasn't just a tent in the snow, it was a fortified base with barracks, labs, fuel stores, and something never seen before in polar exploration. A mobile fortress, the Antarctic Snow Cruiser, a technological marvel ahead of its time, 56 feet long, 37 tons, 4 giant balloon tires, its own onboard lab and sleeping quarters, and even a runway on top for launching reconnaissance planes. It was designed to travel 5,000 miles across the ice without ever stepping outside. But the snow cruiser disappeared, last seen partially buried on the Ross Ice Shelf, and then nothing. No one knows what happened to it. Until now? Some believe the Edisto found exactly that. Remnants of Byrd's lost base, frozen inside the very ice it was built upon, broken off and drifting after decades hidden from the world. Others aren't so sure, because Byrd's expeditions weren't just about exploration. Declassified documents hint at Cold War surveillance, advanced communication systems, and joint military scientific experiments. Could the site on the iceberg have been more than just a camp? And here's where it gets darker. In the late 1930s, Nazi Germany launched secret expeditions to Antarctica, claiming a vast section of the continent they called Neuschwabenland. Allegedly, they constructed bases, ran experiments, and some say they vanished into the ice. What if what the Edisto found wasn't Byrd's camp at all, but part of something far older, far more hidden? A buried outpost, broken loose. A ghost base drifting silently back into the world. And what happened to the snow cruiser? If it really was on that iceberg, where did it go? Did it sink when the ice fractured? Is it still trapped in the depths? Or was it recovered, quietly, by someone else? But here's where the trail takes a chilling turn. Some researchers believe the snow cruiser never disappeared into the ice. They say it was taken. In the early 1950s, during the height of the Cold War, Soviet expeditions mysteriously began operating near the same sector of the Ross Ice Shelf. Rumors swirled that a Soviet team discovered the buried snow cruiser and salvaged it under cover of night. Did they tow it inland, reverse engineer its technology, hide it in one of their secret Arctic facilities? No one knows for sure, because after that, the snow cruiser was never seen again. Although we know some of Antarctica's secrets, there are many more. What if we told you it's hiding something? Something not just strange, but monstrous? On February 14th, 2021, an anonymous post appeared on 4chan's paranormal board. The user, calling himself Son of Anton, claimed his father, a military doctor stationed at McMurdo base in the 1990s, had seen things no one was ever meant to talk about. This is the original post. I'm using this name because it's easier for me to keep track of this stuff. Some background. My dad is a doctor, was stationed at McMurdo for 11 months in the 90s. Not saying what year because he was the only doctor there, and y'all could track me down. Frequently went out on scientific expeditions. First and foremost, there were some areas where people just didn't go. They weren't environmentally hazardous. They just were avoided. For one reason or another, when my dad asked one of the researchers who had been there for 10 years, he went pale and told them to shut up. It was about 30 miles southeast of McMurdo. They took a 5-mile detour around whatever the hell was there. So what was out there? According to the post, strange tracks appeared in the snow. 5-legged, spider-like creatures, spotted only at night. Their stride spanned 30 to 40 human steps. His father had Polaroids, eyewitnesses, but every single one had been warned to stay silent. One night, his father treated a man covered in deep lacerations, babbling nonsense. "They were frozen! We thought they were dead!" he screamed, until guards stormed in and tried to gag him. The doctor objected. The man needed oxygen. The guards didn't care. The man disappeared within hours. The next morning, Anton's father was locked in his room until the incident was handled. No report, no explanation, just a warning, and that was just the beginning. Later, while out driving across the ice with fellow staff, they struck something alive. When they stepped out, they saw a creature, like something from a horror film, spindly legs, fleshy, half-insect features. It was dead, crushed by the vehicle. But before the doctor could react, he was shoved back in the car and ordered to forget what he saw. The story escalates. He claimed bodies kept turning up, military and civilian, torn limb from limb, thawed out and flown home. Many of the bodies belonged to men no one had ever met. Arctic warfare officers, they were called. But no one knew who they were or why they kept dying. And then came the journal. While working on a dead researcher, Anton's father found a notebook in the man's pocket. Inside were detailed diagrams of creatures that didn't exist. When he asked a colleague about them, she froze. Hours later, he was summoned and given a final warning: shut up or get shipped home. But curiosity had taken hold. One day, with his commanding officer away, he broke into the man's quarters and found hundreds of classified documents. Operations, excursions, biological experiments. It was all there. The base, he said, was involved in genetic warfare, creating weaponized hybrids, engineered using DNA from ancient life forms preserved in the ice. He had stumbled into something massive, something global, and that's when they came for him. He was detained, interrogated, and told he would be sent back to the US within the week. But he wasn't done yet. He spent every remaining moment documenting everything. Then, just days before his flight out, another man, a soldier named Jones, burst into his room. He had just returned from a mission and needed to talk. Jones described a facility, a laboratory hidden beneath the ice. He said it wasn't American, it was Chinese, or at least partly. And what they found inside defied belief. There were cages, tunnels, broken glass, blood, bodies, and strange flickering equipment that looked decades ahead of anything they'd seen. The deeper they went, the worse it got. Jones claimed the tunnels housed bullet trains, with destinations marked as Hong Kong, London, New York, Melbourne. He said it was a global network, a hidden infrastructure stretching beneath continents. They were creating bioweapons, spliced from ancient DNA and raised in secret, outside the reach of law or morality. They spent 18 hours clearing the facility. What they saw haunted them. Anton's father kept records, files, testimony, all stored on an old Apple IIe in their home. But soon after Anton began sharing his story, he vanished. No follow-up, no second post, just silence. Some say it was a hoax, a creepypasta, a lonely man spinning tales. But others believe Anton and his father uncovered something real, a dark secret buried under the Antarctic ice, waiting to be exposed. Because with growing whispers of underground tunnel systems, genetically resurrected life, and intercontinental labs hidden beneath the snow. You have to ask yourself, what else, not of this world, is Antarctica hiding? Now, let's go full circle to look at possibly the most outlandish claim ever made about Antarctica. The claim surrounding Operation High Jump, a United States-led operation, which took place in early 1947, as they looked to establish a research base at the South Pole. At least officially, according to some research following the transplantation of German engineers and scientists to the United States as part of Operation Paperclip in the aftermath of the Second World War, they had learned of an already established base of the Third Reich in the frozen world of Antarctica. A base, incidentally, that also had an alien presence with an apparent cover story of wishing to establish a research base in place. The operation was led by highly respected naval officer, Rear Admiral Richard Byrd, and it would be Byrd's own writings and testimony that would seemingly reveal the real reasons for the mission. On the afternoon of February the 19th, 1947, Byrd took to the skies for a reconnaissance flight over the frozen continent. However, according to his diary, notes, flight entries, and press conferences, he would give in the days and weeks following the flight. Instead of seeing thick, rugged sheets of ice, he found himself looking down on lush green vegetation, as well as mammoth-like beasts and other animals that he claimed shouldn't have been there. He would elaborate that he found himself looking at a huge opening, and that when he followed it, he found himself inside the Earth itself. It appeared he was flying over a huge city as he entered a mammoth, cavernous opening. Then things turned even stranger, the claim that something took over his plane, while at the same time, a voice came over the radio. Bidding him welcome, it had, he recalled, a strong Nordic or German accent. He further noticed several round, circular-shaped objects approaching him. His plane was brought to land on the ground, and several tall, blonde-haired men approached his plane. His last flight note declared that a voice from outside his plane was ordering him to open the cargo doors, according to what he would later tell the Chilean newspaper, El Mercurio. He and his men were accompanied to a large building where they were served drinks, unlike anything they had previously tasted. He then claimed to have met with representatives of a race that resided in the inner earth. They told him that they had been allowed to enter unharmed, as they were aware of his noble character. He would further reveal that the bombs dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima had created concern among their kind regarding the human race, and that they now felt compelled to intervene. Should such an event appear likely in the future? Perhaps most alarming of all, particularly in light of his statement, certainly in a race felt compelled to intervene in human affairs, was his claim that the United States military had to prepare for attack from objects that could fly from pole to pole at incredible speeds. Whether we should take Byrd at his word or treat his claims with a pinch of salt remains open to debate. It is perhaps interesting, though, that he was hospitalized only days after his press conference. And what's more, despite his renowned reputation, he was never again allowed to speak publicly about his experiences again, at least in an official capacity. In his writings, around a decade later, Byrd would write that he had been ordered to remain silent on his encounter for the sake of humanity. While the claims of Richard Byrd were one of the first mysterious events surrounding Antarctica, one of the most recent is no less mysterious or thought-provoking. It occurred at some point in the late 1990s or early 2000. Deep below the Russian research facility Vostok Station, it has long been suspected by scientists that a great lake of water flowed below the ice, since the base had been first established in 1957. The presence of the lake under the sheets of ice was finally confirmed in 1993. After 3 decades of tests and experiments by both Russian and British scientists. What is further interesting about Lake Vostok is that scientists believe its environment is very similar to that on Europa, one of the main moons of Jupiter, and a celestial body that many believe could well harbor life. And it didn't take long for the scientists with an interest in studying Europa to turn their attention to the lake under Vostok Station. It also didn't take long for conspiracies and alleged leaked documents to find their way into the public domain. The general thrust of the claims are that a secret, an ultra-specialized elevator was painstakingly installed through the thick ice and eventually down to the environment below, including Lake Vostok. What's more, according to a whistleblower testimony from someone who claims to have worked on the project, Dr. Anton Padalka, who once sought sanctuary in Switzerland after allegedly abandoning the operation. And they found a lot more than they were expecting. Padalka claims the team discovered a 14-armed octopus in the waters of Lake Vostok. This octopus was unlike anything they'd previously seen, with the glass octopus being the closest comparison. According to Padalka, not only did this being seen to have superior intelligence to a standard octopus, it could paralyze a person with its venom from 150 feet away. Even more remarkable, it had the ability to change its form and mimic a number of other aquatic creatures. By the time the research team had realized it could also assume the form of a person and mimic the crew, it was too late to save one of the biologists from being ripped to pieces by this apparent alien life form. It was eventually captured, whereupon Russian military officers arrived at the base and confiscated it. Its whereabouts now is unknown, but rumblings among the crew were that these would be attempts to weaponize the alien DNA of the unsettling aquatic alien, which would ultimately lead Padalka to publicly reveal what he knew.
We're not talking a few symbols. We're talking whole walls, 40 feet high. They took an instrument and they penetrated where all these thousands of symbols are. We can't even comprehend how you would do this unless there is something that interacts literally with the molecular level of the basalt. The very material of which the ceilings are made is neutralizing gravity. We're not dealing at all with anything human. I think in my own work that what has been unfolding for me since 2017 have been whistleblowers that have been coming from a variety of directions, but the two most significant have been U.S. Navy SEALs. I know their background, I've seen their documents, I know photos, I know places that they have been. And when one sits in front of me and says, I have seen the photographs of humanoids that are based in Antarctica, and that what he has seen with his own eyes 2 miles down under ice are hieroglyphs that archaeologists that he was in, that was the mission, was a scientist had been in there studying all this ancient archaeology 2 miles down under the ice. And the Navy SEAL gets to walk one of these huge rooms, 9-acre rooms, ceilings. One SEAL tells me he's been there in 2012. The SEAL that I have been able to videotape, he was there in 2004. So I have two completely different SEALs. They're describing exactly the same kind of architecture. Black basalt, symbols that the archaeologist that the 2003 Navy SEAL, his task was to go in and do what the SEALs call extract. That's when they have somebody who is there on mission and the SEALs come to get them out, to take them someplace else. So he got to talk with this archaeologist at great length. And he said that the archaeologist compared thousands. We're not talking a few symbols. We're talking whole walls, 40 feet high, completely covered with symbols that the archaeologist says are somewhere in between Mayan and Egyptian and are neither. And that they took an instrument and they penetrated where all these thousands of symbols are, and they all go in 7 centimeters, which is about 3.5 inches. But they're thin. They're carved into this dense black basalt on an even 7 centimeters. And the SEAL said to me, in discussing with the scientist, we can't even comprehend how you would do this unless there is something that interacts literally with the molecular level of the basalt and turns it into these very refined, evenly deep symbols. The SEAL said that when you would walk into these big 9-acre rooms, they can't see supports. So imagine that you're in a 9-acre room. There's a ceiling, but there are no supports. The SEAL who was there in 2012 independently has his own unbelievable story that I'm sharing at Awakening. He said that he was in a space and they knew by measurement of what they were doing from satellite that the ceiling was at least 80 feet high, no supports. Both SEALs tell me the same thing, that the conclusion is that the very material of which the ceilings are made is neutralizing gravity, self-activating software neutralizing gravity. It's not something that the human mind is used to seeing or even comprehending.
Is this definitely ET then and not an ancient civilization?
Ask him the same question, both. And they both say, we're not dealing at all with anything human. We are dealing with ancient extraterrestrial interactions with this planet going back probably millions of years. When you ask the question, when was the last time that Antarctica was free of ice? The consensus in terms of geophysics is that you have to go back to at least 34 million years ago. There was a period around 14 million years ago where it might have heated up and become drier and then gone back to ice. But the big division is 34 to 33 million years ago. And what had been happening for the previous 70 million, that is the disconnect from Pangea when all of the land was all hooked together and a portion that became this roundish Antarctica starts coming down for at least 70 million years, moving south the whole time for at least 70 million and probably longer. The entire moving Pangea continent that we know as Antarctica was tropical. The pollens, the seeds, it's all tropical, high temperature land until, and it's a huge mystery, what happened between 34 million and 33 million years ago. And that is when ice began rapidly to build up to 2 miles and in a few places 3 miles on this round continent. So the question that both SEALs said to me, could 62-acre sites, half a dozen of them, that are now 2 miles under ice. The 2012 SEAL got there by going in on a submarine, coming out, and said to him, one of the most astonishing things is that they came out of the submarine into what looked like a molded piece.
How did they know where to look?
Oh, we're dealing with ice penetrating, ground penetrating radar. We know a lot about what is 2 miles and 3 miles down. It isn't being shared with the public, but our government and probably other governments know quite a bit.
Did they say that there's ever military from other countries there as well, or is it pretty much America that's...
In terms of the SEALs, they would come, Spartan 1, in the video that I'm sharing at Awakening, they came into McMurdo. They came in on aircraft carrier, launches the helicopter goes to McMurdo. They get on half tracks. They go up toward the Beardmore Glacier, and that is the jump off to how they get to this deep underground through an octagonal structure. The other Navy SEAL who was there in 2012, he's the one who came in on a submarine to this 2 mile deep entrance. And he said that it was astonishing that as they come out, most submarines, if they're that deep, there has to be some sort of a decompression airlock thing. And he said the whole structure, they came in on the submarine, and when they move, just like the SEAL from 2004, 3-4, the walls move with you with light, that the temperature stays between 68 and 72 degrees Fahrenheit, that they have looked for the energy source. They cannot find anything that has wires. There's nothing that we would recognize, and yet, if it is 33 to 34 million years old, it is still sustaining a structural integrity with temperature, with pressure. He said, when you realize that you're in a place, I'm walking. That's what Spartan 1 told me. He said, I am walking. It takes me 15 minutes to walk from one end of one room to the other. This is how big the structures are. And he said, you have light that is moving with you. You have this even temperature. You're looking up at ceilings, and there is no structure that is going up. And they are maybe 33 to 34 million years old.
These crafts are buildings.
Well, maybe, but the idea is that these structures would be what our government has described in extraterrestrial investigations for a long time, self-activating software. That we are dealing with advanced intelligences that know how to take a wall, put in at the atomic level, programming, just like we would do software in a computer, only they're doing it with structure. And both of the SEALs said, if you think about 2 miles of ice on any structure that humans could make on the earth, it would not sustain 2 miles of ice. It would collapse. SEAL Spartan 1, who was there in August of 2003, he says that when you know that you are 2 miles down and you're looking at these ceilings that have no support structures, he said it's incomprehensible to the human mind when you know where you are and you know how much weight there is above. And therefore, the ceilings have to be some kind of self-activating software that are sustaining because they are neutralizing gravity, and there must be some change in the physics between these deep structures and all of the ice. Sort of in a way that the existence of these structures, to the SEALs who have been there, are living evidence of something that is not comprehensible to them.
How does it affect them, that? How do they process? Have they struggled with this experience?
Well, they both have said the same thing to me. And it's one of the reasons why Spartan 1 did the video interview with his colleague, who is a Marine, Spartan 2. He said, when I was there to extract that science, and I'm looking at all of these symbols in this dark, dark volcanic basalt, walking 15 minutes from one end of one quote-unquote room to another. Each of the facilities, 62 acres, 6 at least that he knew of. He said to me, Linda, why shouldn't every human on the surface of this planet know about what we are going to in a military way that's 2 miles under ice in Antarctica? And that is the everyman question. If this exists, why? What would be any possible reason for why humanity on the surface of this planet should not be told everything there is to know and show about huge architecture deep under the ice of Antarctica? Why? What is it that our government and other governments know that they don't want the surface life to know? Okay, go another step. Spartan 1, his Marine colleague, the other SEAL, they've all been exposed to this same information. They have been shown photographs that the exact same symbols that are carved in that basalt in Antarctica, they have seen photographs that we have taken on Mars. And they have seen photographs that have been taken on an interior base on the moon. And they say all of the symbols match.
There's an entire advanced civilization there, including some of the largest pyramids on Earth, right in Antarctica. He said he flew into an area that opened up at Antarctica, and he went into an area where it was lush and tropical almost. We have a new enemy that can fly from pole to pole with extreme speed. And he says they come and go as they please because nobody can stop them.
There are perfectly right-angled grid, which look like foundations of a city. There's the potential of pyramids poking through the ice. There is under ice civilizations. There are very dark things that are also happening down there, including these cloning labs we're starting to hear about. They're holding a lot of technology from the rest of us, and I hope this changes very soon.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the theories that suggest that there could be remnants of ancient civilizations hidden beneath Antarctica's ice, such as pyramid structures. Could there be temples down there? You know, just some of your ideas and theories based on your research.
Sure. Well, your listeners know that I did an 8-part series called Secrets of Antarctica with Forbidden Knowledge TV, available right now if you go on the website and check it out, where I went into the best data points, the best information about high-tech antediluvian civilizations.
Yep.
And while my trip down there was just along the Palmer Peninsula coastline, many of these sites that I've uncovered are pretty far in there, pretty deep inland. And let's not forget, Antarctica is huge. It's bigger than the lower 48, twice the size of Australia. So the distances are very vast. To go to a lot of these locations, put together this mosaic of information I found, and Google Earth has been very helpful. However, I've also noticed Google Earth likes to block certain things out. So they give us some really juicy nuggets, but then other ones are just a big white square that they don't even bother to airbrush around and make it look natural.
Yeah.
So there's definitely some secrecy down there, and there are no fly zone and other places that are forbidden, mainly because they're just so inaccessible. But to answer your question, what I found and put into the series Secrets of Antarctica is that there are perfectly right-angled grid, which look like foundations of a city. There's the potential of pyramids poking through the ice. And there is under ice civilization, as deep as the rabbit hole goes, but this is the giant hole in the ice 50 miles from the South Pole. I've talked to Linda Moulton Howe's whistleblower Brian S. and other people who have seen it or know about it, Tazinski from Russia, and even Admiral Byrd's diary, where he said he was able to fly his plane into this hole, and then there's just this other world down there. And then eventually he went to this kind of an emerald city, but it was in pastel colors. There is pretty good evidence. And based on we're not even talking about underground, just under the ice, because Antarctica is the most volcanically active continent in the world. So you have all this geothermal activity and the propensity to create these large under ice domes, as well as chimneys for the hot air to come out. And that's what that hole in the ice is. And there are other very, very large holes, and we're talking miles across.
Wow.
So very, very big ecosystem. That's kind of what is really fascinating to me, is that there could be entire life forms that exist down there that have yet to be discovered.
You know, I know what a lot of people are thinking right now. The people that believe that the Earth may be a particular shape, they want to know about the ice walls. Now, you've been there in person. You've taken that arduous trip. It's a very hard place to get to. It's very time consuming. You've gone through and we have the video footage of you there, right? So What is your opinion about this ice wall?
Okay, well, a wall suggests that it's connected to the ground, right? From the ground up as a wall. The ice shelf, which are huge, they're about 30 stories tall, but they're floating on water. And that's what you normally see when people are talking about the flat Earth, that there's this ice wall. Well, it doesn't connect to the ground, and it is, so in some cases, hundreds of miles long. The Larsen ice shelf, the Ross ice shelf, if you were right up on it, you wouldn't see the end, right? So it would appear to be a wall.
Yeah.
But there are other areas of Antarctica that don't freeze. And that's where we went down several hundred miles along the Palmer Peninsula. It's also called the Antarctic Peninsula. It's that finger of land that is closest to the southern tip of South America. And we got a boat out of Ushuaia, Argentina, the southernmost city of the world, and did a 26-day trip down there. So I really try to avoid having debates with flat earthers. It really goes nowhere. Right. But if I do, I pull out my phone and say, hey, you want me to just show you pictures of what continental Antarctica looks like? Because that's where they have to say Antarctica doesn't exist, that it's just the land beyond the ice, and every once in a while you can get through. Well, that's the continent of Antarctica, and I set foot on it. Yeah,
absolutely. You made it there. It's a huge continent. A lot of people don't even realize it's an actual continent. Like, they don't realize that Africa is a continent. I talked to some people the other day. They thought that Africa was a country. I was like, no, Africa is a massive continent, just like Antarctica.
Yeah.
And there's a lot going on down there. It's a huge landmass with a lot of different areas with a very diverse ecological system.
I agree with you. I think after Antarctica, Africa is probably the continent that has the most amount of secrets still yet to be uncovered. You've got the Great Zimbabwe, the ancient gold mines of South Africa that Michael Tellinger writes about and has discovered, even a Stonehenge type stone feature called Adam's Calendar. So there's so much down there that shows that there was a high-tech civilization in Africa quite a long time ago too.
With the inner Earth, because a lot of people have inner Earth theories. I particularly believe that just from seeing some areas of the Earth that are open, like the Nika mine out of Mexico, where there's gigantic crystals in there, that there's these huge openings underground, and that maybe these are some of the areas where people may have taken refuge in the past. But I'm not too sure if there's a hollow Earth where there's a central sun. I'm kind of leaning more towards huge, massive openings that could have housed potentially thousands, even tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of people at some time. What are your theories on openings in the Earth and things like that?
And I do have a chapter in Beyond Esoteric. Here's the Nicaea crystal mine. You can see that person there, how giant those quartz crystals are, bigger than any crystal ever been discovered. And that mine was only opened 2 decades ago. So new discoveries are continuing also underground. And I would agree with you. It's kind of hard to imagine or believe that there's an inner sun, but there does seem to be a light source in under the ice. And could that be just the light reflecting through? I don't know, because the polar plateau is about 2 miles thick at the South Pole. But we already know that there are deep underground military bases, 130 known in this country. So the propensity for them connecting to cave systems, which can be very, very old, as well as I call them legacy bases, alien bases, like Dulce, New Mexico, even Area 54, where the tall whites reside. That was there a long, long time before the U.S. in the Nellis Air Force Base. And here's a map of all the tunnels and these are just the known ones. And they've been building these things. This is what an entrance would look like. Find them on Google Earth. That they built them during the continuity of government during the Cold War. They actually brought over paperclip Nazis who were building Fortress Europe because they had very high technology into building these underground bases. Brought them over here and then started hollowing out our country. So not even going into whether or not there are civilizations down there. We know for sure that our government's down there, and they're massive. Some are 10 layers high and miles deep. I mean, these are whole cities under there that are intentionally built in the last 70 years.
Yeah, they call them DUMBs, deep underground military bases.
Yep.
And I think a lot of them are interconnected within the United States, at least, which is wild. And then they have these train tubes that go at Mach 2 speeds. And Emery Smith says he was on them. And they even go under the ocean. But what's really interesting right now, Billy, is a lot of earthquakes that are 10 kilometers down, which is the level of the tubes, as well as most of the single-story bases. So anytime you hear of an earthquake between 5 and 6.5 on the Richter scale that are 10 kilometers down, it could be that they're taking some of these bases out, because there are very dark things that are also happening down there, including these cloning labs we're starting to hear about. Wow. Amazing. Yeah. That's crazy. There have been talks of the destruction of some of these bases. There have been talks of stripping the stuff out of the bases and then, destroying them so that no one can get access to them.
Right.
Also, whatever machine they use, this vitrification nuclear-powered boring machine underground, supposedly could be one of the reasons for a lot of these massive sinkholes on the surface in different cities and areas. That is because of the underground boring that's happening beneath our feet.
Right. And there's certain areas that people are hearing these humming sounds and occasionally like an explosion sound, but far, far away or even underground, and then shaking that's not quite an earthquake. But here's an image of what the train tubes look like that can go at Mach 2 speeds. I mean, this is high technology. And by the way, it's free energy they use. They don't use carbon-based internal combustion engines that would pollute the tubes. So they're holding a lot of technology from the rest of us. And I hope this changes very soon, because we don't have to be polluting. This could very well change the course of humanity and clean up this planet as it should.
Today on Cosmic Disclosure, we're with Tim, a tactical advisor from Germany who analyzes and suggests various strategies in relation to extraterrestrial groups in contact with Earth. Also joining us today is Captain Randy Kramer, who claims to be the public spokesperson for the United States Marine Corps Special Section. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
We're going to have a really intriguing episode today talking about bases and beings in Antarctica. So, Tim, let's start with you. What do you know about Antarctica, what some of the bases and beings there, some of the history?
Yeah, so my knowledge about Antarctica is from documents, and it ends kind of somewhere in the 1960s. So Germany in the 1930s, 1920s, they were really interested in the now called UAP phenomena. It was then the Germans at that time had missions. They went to India, to different other parts, Tibet, and they were doing all this esoteric research, which was kind of popular at that time in Germany, much more popular than anywhere else in the world. And they came to the conclusion that before there was some kind of major magnetic pole shift, different continents look differently. And they were assuming that Antarctica had been some kind of continent with a much milder climate and having a extraterrestrial race that lived there and originated there. So that was kind of interesting to them. And one of the reasons to go to Antarctica in order to A, find whatever's left there, and B, place a basis. And the documents say and state that especially the SS had some departments that were doing research on UFOs. We know the story about these from the British called them Foo Fighters, appearing everywhere in the Second World War scenario. And Admiral Dönitz at that time, he got the task from Hitler to build a basis down in Antarctica, which he did. And they went there. It was especially the SS that was doing that. The Germans also sent the so-called Schwabenlander, which was a ship that the only aircraft carrier at that time had some aircrafts on it, so they could, explore Antarctica. But especially the SS did a lot of groundwork down there. And at some time when the end of the war was coming and it was, expectable that Germany is going to lose the war, at least in Europe, and Germany could not be saved anymore, Himmler himself, he had built kind of the first breakaway nation ever occurred in the modern times, because he was actually second man in the state after Hitler, but he, kept all the technology for himself and the SS, and they kind of built the first, black budget programs at that time and tried to ship everything down to Antarctica. The Americans have some of the submarines, they have found them. They also found material for the nuclear bomb, which seems to be a German invention. They seem to have worked on that. Also, a lot of scientists from that time were pretty deep in the nuclear research. From that, I guess, the American nuclear program emerged, and that's where they went, putting all people down there. I also think that from everything that I've gone through, that Heinrich Himmler, the Americans seem to have not caught him. There is a photograph which shows him dead on the ground, which kind of look a little bit like Himmler. Also put like the famous glasses on his eyes and his dead body. The story is that Himmler died in the interview. He killed himself while all the other military people are, interrogating him. So the documents seem to say that Himmler took his chance to escape from Germany, put everything and all the technology on those on the Cow-class submarines, brought it to Antarctica. Hitler, in his last days, got the information that something was going on. Mm-hmm. In his last will, he was super furious. In his last will, he ordered to have Himmler killed, actually. And that's where the story went. That's what I read.
How many people were actually shipped over there to Antarctica, would you say?
Interesting. So the Germans had a mission and a program where they were systematically looking for orphans.
Orphans,
orphans. So people who have no family. There was a program where they artificially tried to raise children for Germany. They took those because they actually have nothing to relate to.
Right.
And they sent them down there, as well as a whole lot of therapeutes and psychologists,
right.
Mostly females. So you have a lot of
Why is that?
Why is that? Because the documents seem to say that there's some kind of portal or something that extremely changes the perception of reality, and they needed stable people down there, so they put all those female therapists and psychologists onto those ships and submarines in order to preserve the sanity of the personnel.
Tim, most of the people think it's a polar cap. So how did they get in there, number one? And how did they form and get all the people on?
So they seem to have used a special class of submarines, which uses special state-of-the-art technology at that time in order to go very, very deep. I think it was almost double the depth of a conventional submarine. It was inside the so-called Führer convoy, which was, the collect or the class. They used that to transport material, technology down there. And so from the documents, they went down there, carved something. It kind of created a subclimate. So it's not freezing cold in there, just like maybe an igloo or something. Right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So they built up on that.
So Randy, what do you think about that? How did they transform that area underneath the ice caps?
Yeah, my understanding that's basically correct. Some of the ice shelves, are 1,000 feet thick. Mm-hmm. So to get under them, you would have to, at the time, you would have had to have a submarine that could go, 800, 900, over 1,000 feet deep, which is at the time would be ridiculously deep. And then came up in what were natural ice quays, caverns that had sort of hollowed out a little bit, and then used steam to just make them as big as they needed to be. And then if you've got imagine you come underneath an ice cave, and you steam out the cave, so it's got a 100-foot ceiling and it's several hundred feet wide. Well, the ice structure of the whole thing would keep it from collapsing. It would be like an igloo. It'd be like 60 degrees in there or something like that. And you'd be out of the wind and the sub-zero temperatures and the stuff that kills people up on the surface for sure.
So why Antarctica?
So to my understanding, there's something about the polars of this planet which makes Antarctica interesting. I think in the first place, they thought of Antarctica being the lost continent. And that raised, the question, what's down there and what can we do with it? And also they needed a place where they could, build a base that is basically unconquerable. So lots and lots of technology that they went through in World War II, they brought down there. They took the time and the position that they had there in order to build it, to restructure and finalize it. And everyone who can look up things on Wikipedia, they will see that there's this Admiral Byrd incident where the US brought a lot of material and personnel down there, and they had this encounter with those flying machines.
You said earlier that the Germans were going down there because of not only that, but because of an extraterrestrial existence. Could you elaborate on how did they know that, and also what are these flying machines and who is operating them?
So they were doing lots and lots of research in esoteric terms and also extraterrestrial technology back in the 1920s, 1930s. Basically, there seems to have been some kind of species that once was there. I don't know, maybe you know something, Randy, who was down there. It seems to be, way back.
Right.
Yeah.
Ancient times.
Very ancient times.
Right.
The processing of these computers made so much heat that in order to cool it down, they were opening the louvers to transfer exterior air in. If somebody walked up to you and they had something you had never, ever seen before in your life, and they were just simply calling it a bullet carrier, there are physical things that happen to people that are near this equipment when they're figuring out how it works.
If you can just tell about what, when, and where, and what you saw, and just go through what you directly saw and experienced.
You got it. First and foremost, let me just let everybody know, I spent an entire year at the South Pole Station on the maintenance crew. And the ice cube neutrino detector was simply one facility of many that I paid attention to there. And in that process, I obviously learned the science and stuff like that. Like you said, it's a lot of mumbo jumbo that people don't really need to know about, but that's the pretense that it's presented to the world, that the National Science Foundation cut a check for this facility at the South Pole Station and is doing science, wonderfully complex science. But what I have come to find out is that this device, not only is it a passive observational scientific device that is massive and embedded in the ice at the South Pole, it also transmits. I provided documentation for it. Anybody can look it up now. It is referenceable on the internet. I call it the DOM document, and it's on the archives at my website. But what it states is that this device, which has 5,160 DOMs, which is a digital optical module. The idea is that it's observing the neutrino interaction when it hits the nucleus of an ice molecule down there. That's what it's supposed to be built to do. But I found in the paperwork that each of these DOMs also can transmit up to 2,047 volts per DOM. That makes this a giant, powerful, active phased array system, which I am now doing due diligence to let the world know what that means. And the possibilities list is huge.
Well, so before we go out too far into that, let's deal with the basics here, is what I was wanting you to talk about.
You got it.
I know you were there working for Raytheon.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let's go through that. You were assigned there for a year working with Raytheon. It was year X to Y. I mean, just, the whole thing before we get into a lot of the technical.
You got it. So so November of 2010, I landed on the ice at McMurdo Station and was rapidly deployed further south to 90 degrees at the South Pole Station. I stayed there for the 365 days. That employment, that time period, I guess, was for the summer season. We had we peaked out at close to 280 personnel at the site in the summer season. The winter season, we went down to 49. And the neutrino detector was something that I was pretty much obligated to go out to every single day. The equipment was so much. This is another thing that I learned that's peculiar, is there's actually so much computer processing equipment. Remember, this is the South Pole Station in the wintertime. My job required me to go out there, and people laugh at me for this and get mad, but I say it. We had chicken wire on a air inlet duct, like a snorkel duct, that the snorkel side went up and connected to the building, and there was louvers there that were temperature activated louvers. So the processing of these computers made so much heat that in order to cool it down, they were opening the louvers to transfer exterior air in to keep these computers cold. People really, think about that. This is a building it's sometimes minus 80 degrees outside. To think that you need that type of cooling capacity. And that was what my job was to make sure this building wasn't overheating in the middle of winter at the South Pole.
And why don't you describe, I know you've told me before, but for the audience, the size, the depth of the array, how big it was, how far down under the ice it was, et cetera. See, again, I want to get, so people have a visual of what we're talking about here, because otherwise, none of this makes any sense. So you got to, let's paint a picture of the facility, the size of the array, how deep it was, was it operational when you got there? Or was it operational later? All that detail.
You got it. So first and foremost, the central facility where all the processing happens, sitting atop the ice at South Pole Station, which is 10,300 feet actual elevation. And that is ice above Earth. So the ice cube drillers first had to go and drill. They would steam drill down and go basically 2 miles down, close to a 32 to 34 inch diameter hole. And they would drop a string cable down with all of these DOMs on it. Each one of those holes was drilled down, and it was drilled in a giant hexagon that covered kilometers of area in a length and width dimension. And then as far as the depth, going all the way down close to Earth at approximately 2 miles down to that. And everything was cabled and went back to the central building where all the processing computer server towers were and all that stuff. And that was the facility that was being accessed every day and made to be chilled.
Now, apparently this was being built and developed by Raytheon. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. In the season that I was there, which was fall 2010 was when I arrived. We transitioned. It was right around, I think, January or February that IceCube officially transitioned from construction to operations and maintenance. Same thing with the elevated station itself, actually, that year.
Okay. And the system, what were the people there told about why it was there and what it was doing, allegedly?
The intended purpose for the IceCube neutrino detector was to detect neutrinos through the muon creation, which was when a neutrino coming from anywhere, in any direction, it could be from the other side of the planet, from off planet, through the planet, it doesn't matter. But when any of those neutrinos smashes into the nucleus of the water molecule, which is in the extremely pure ice. There's nothing else in there. So that's kind of why they're doing it, because they know it's a concentration of something specific, which is just pure water. Great product. When it hits the nucleus, there's two things that occur. A blue flash of light, and the neutrino and the nucleus are destroyed, and a new product called a muon is created. The detector is searching for the blue flash of light. So whatever direction it comes from, it would make like a blast through the array, that when it would hit the nucleus, it would be like a reaction through all of the different DOMs, because they're optical modules and they're receiving at that point. On the receiving end, there's just a bloom that shows up in the array. And from that bloom and the amount of light that hits each DOM, they can triangulate the direction from which the neutrino came from. Mm-hmm. I was told that they would then take that information, transmit it to all the different telescopes in the world, and then that would allow them to then look, because they're so curious as to what neutrinos are and where they come from.
Mm-hmm. And so that was what they were telling you, is that this was a observation technology related to astrophysics or astronomy somehow.
Absolutely, that's correct.
Yeah. And what did you discover it actually is used for?
Quite much more. The ability to transmit is a big deal, and I know a lot of people may not necessarily understand what that means. So I want to paint a picture for them. It's one thing to say that, and the government does this all the time. They sidestep stuff. It would be like if somebody walked up to you and they had something you'd never, ever seen before in your life, and they were just simply calling it a bullet carrier. It's a bullet carrier. It carries bullets. But if they never told you it's a pistol or a handgun, they're being rather deceptive in what that thing does. Mm-hmm. And that's the way I now look at the IceCube neutrino detector, is that this is a savagely different device from what I was presented. And I'm trying to express to the world what that means, because it is absolutely a very big deal.
So you're convinced it was also had not only data gathering, but also offensive weapon capability.
I'm absolutely suggesting that is still on the list of things to check into. Mm-hmm. I'm a firm advocate of Occam's razor, that every possibility is left on the table, and I have to assess each one. And the split second I can negate something as a possibility, I will apply Occam's razor, cut it off, and remove it. But so far, everything that's left on the table is still possible.
No,
there's a lot.
Yes, there is. Yeah, and we can get into that in a moment. But I'm trying to stick with the things that are factually happened and observed, and then we can talk about implications and our assessment in a moment. You told me a very interesting thing that happened the instant they switched this system on. The New Zealand event.
I have a high suspicion that this is when it was going active and they were dialing things in, and that they caused the Christchurch accident. That was
you're referring to the earthquake.
Absolutely, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I believe that they were dialing it in, and there was a high probability that was just misfire.
Mm-hmm. And a side effect. See, one of the things that people, just to give a little background, a lot of people have heard me refer in the past of scalar and longitudinal electromagnetic energy, which, just give people, not to geek out too far here, but when you look at a normal light wavelength, there's a wave to it like this, and a laser is coherent light where all the green spectrum is lined up. When you're doing something with the longitudinal scalar waves are actually a point that goes out longitudinally without the wave, and is much faster than the speed of light, literally, and the normal speed of light is still light, it's still electromagnetic field, but it also can be weaponized. So the early one of the euphemisms that are used, you were talking about the euphemism of this being some kind of like a bullet carrier, when really it's a gun. People don't realize that when J. Edgar Hoover was written to by the field agent there in Roswell, the memo we have that's now become the most viewed document on the FBI website officially states that there was a new, quote, radar array at Roswell. In fact, what that is often used at, people I have here, I'm in Washington right now, who worked in these systems, radar is often a euphemism or a catch-all phrase for not only a passive detection of an aircraft or bouncing waves off the metal skin of an aircraft, radar, but also an active warfare system, and they will piggyback them together. So this is a common motif. It's a pattern that I've seen over the last 30 years of working in this area. And I know that it's also true that the operational systems that were not only the neutrino light detectors on satellites in the, almost 50 years ago now, in the early mid 70s, those were, quote, slaved to active systems that were longitudinal scalar directional energy weapon type systems that would then lock on. Now, why is that important? When an interstellar vehicle is stepping down, let's call it, out of transdimensional space-time, resonating beyond the speed of light, matter, electrons as we think of it. That's that whole area of physics has been kept secret. When they are going from that into this dimension full on, the very first thing that happens is a big burst of neutrino light. And that's why the National Reconnaissance Office that runs all the really super secret satellite systems up in space wanted this man's invention and system back in the early 70s. So we know that those systems have been used for detection connected to offensive weapon targeting purposes for that long. I think it's a stepping the game up quite a bit. If in fact there is a similar system ground base at the South Pole. And one thing you mentioned, I want to emphasize, neutrinos go straight through the Earth, matter, anywhere unimpeded. So the fact that it's on the South Pole doesn't mean that it can only pick up neutrino bursts that are coming from the direction of the South Pole out into space. It can pick it up circumferentially everywhere.
Yep. Yeah, a lot of people make that error.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I actually have an understanding. My ex-father-in-law passed away, but before he passed away, he had informed me that when he was in the Army way back when in World War II, he was in very special detail that was working with first microwave line of sight radar. Excuse me. Very special stuff. He was super top secret. They never left the country, and they were ordered to write letters as if they were in the European front.
Right. Yeah, well, a lot of people don't realize that these sort of electromagnetic fields and experimentation, these go back to the late 1800s and the early 1900s. If you look at this historically, this is why, I at some point, maybe in the near future, I want to work on a documentary that's a special 2-hour deep dive going back over 100 years on the sort of hidden electromagnetic and related technologies, because obviously they can be used to tap into the so-called 0 point or quantum vacuum and give us free energy and save the biosphere. But, I always say this as a medical doctor, emergency doctor, that you can take a knife to put butter on your bread or to slice someone's throat. And unfortunately, the latter is what's been going on in these covert programs, because they've all been hoovered up like a giant vacuum cleaner into covert unacknowledged special access projects and developed for military purposes. And this is an enormous problem, because most of those sort of systems, by the way, if you bring something like this up to someone, in the White House or even most directors of the CIA and or members of Congress and Senate Intelligence Committee, they know absolutely nothing. I mean, when I say nothing, I mean zero about this. That's a problem. I mean, it's a huge problem because there's no oversight on it. So tell us a little bit more of what your research into this has uncovered, and any other people that you've stayed in touch with who have still worked in that facility, and what the status of it now, 10 years on.
I think it's perfect where you were just at, because I think the reason those people are ignorant about these types of projects is because of compartmentalization of information. And it's amazing, because here I am, somebody who actually wintered at the South Pole Station. And from a crew, I mean, these are limited numbers of people on the planet that do this. And even of that crew, I'm one of the few that was able to see through the compartments. So yes, I've stayed in contact with people, because a lot of this has been getting in touch with folks and saying, hey, you know what? You remember that time that such and such happened?
Yes.
And we had to respond, and this was what we were told, and this was what was going on. What if we look at it this way? I need to talk to you. So a lot of that has happened. I've absolutely been in touch with a lot of the hands from my crew. One of the main reasons that I'm coming forward is because I've maintained that contact, and I do believe these people have been negatively impacted by what I believe are now called directed energy weapons. That people have suffered. There are physical things that happen to people that are near this equipment when they're figuring out how it works.
Right.
And then also, I believe that because we had a potential to go offensively, I believe there's a potential for us to have been attacked.
Now, what kind of symptoms you're referring? I'm now to sort of biological and brainwave problems that people have had. I know we talked about this before when I first had a conversation with you. Can you go into that? What sort of sequela, we'd say in medicine, have people experienced?
A lot of it has to do with the list of things that are coming out now on the Havana syndrome list. So I apologize for not having all the medical terminology correct.
No, that's fine. Yeah.
I'm just dealing with the folks and what they're telling me.
Right.
They're having memory issues. They're having a lot of trouble sleeping. They're having issues with temperature rise out of nowhere. These things are all peculiar to me. I mean, I'm not trying to justify it or anything. I'm just telling you what people are griping, and this is becoming more and more prevalent. It's kind of why I came out of the shadows, because I was noticing this in my life and my crew, but now I'm seeing things like, since last we spoke, we have the Directed Energy Threat Emergency Response Act has come out as a House resolution. The Department of Defense has issued guidelines for their personnel how to report these symptoms internally so they can take care of it appropriately.
Right.
So this stuff's getting very real in just the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's been a lot in the mainstream news. Those of you who haven't heard about this. Our embassy in Havana had a lot of personnel that had some kind of a directional energy weapon targeted them. There's been more recent ones in other countries at various facilities. And they have experienced this whole sort of constellation of symptoms, migraine, sleeplessness, emotional instability, big mood swings, and other physical problems, including what you're referring to, feeling like you're having a fever or what have you. Now, I remember this all goes back to this whole area of, let's call it forbidden science, that deals with a scalar, longitudinal, trans-dimensional physics is what it's been called, that deal with these kinds of electromagnetic fields. I liken it a little bit to people, working unwittingly near the Hanford reactor, and ended up getting radiation poisoning, or people who were near a downwind from the plumes of the atomic bombs being tested. There's a lot going on. And of course, the government never wants to admit that people are being injured by anything like this they're doing, because they don't even acknowledge the project exists. This is one of the big problems, is that if you're not going to even acknowledge the fact that these technologies are extant, that they're already all over the place, and because they're that classified, then obviously you're going to deny the symptomatology resulting from those technologies being deployed or used, even if the negative effects on people are secondary, not the intended one. Although I will say the so-called radionic psychotronic type systems are not a mythology. Those exist and have been developed quite thoroughly over the last 70, 80 years or more, and are also weapon systems.
There's a phrase in the military when they come with systems that maintain plausible deniability, and they say things like plausible deniability must be maintained.
Yes, right.
That means when there's collateral damage and fallout, plausible deniability will be maintained. They're not going to discuss what happened. There will be a cover story. You'll get some swamp gas spiel.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So what else have you discovered? I know you mentioned there was one supervisor who was there, a woman who became, even while you were there, became seemingly unhinged.
You just read my mind. That was right where I was going. Our station manager made the news when we were there. This is all referenceable. She was having great issue, I would just say. We'll put it that way. I'm certainly not a doctor, but I'm a winter rover South Pole expert, and from my knowledge and experience of being a winter rover at the South Pole, she seemed to be in the throes of what is medically called winter rover syndrome. They've done studies. There's a certain mechanism of failure to the psyche that occurs typically when you go down the wrong path there, I guess to say. And she seemed to be in that situation. And at the time, she was under the impression, I believe, that she believed she had a stroke. But it turned out that it didn't seem she had a stroke. I believe that she believed it, but I think this was, again, an impact from something that occurred during our winter season there, that she and others, there was an event that negatively impacted everybody. We had a drill. There was a drill out by our radio systems, our radio array, and it was her idea to set up a drill. We had all kinds of response teams, fire teams, medical teams, and the idea was in the harsh climate to test all of our equipment and get out there. Long story short is either A, that equipment wasn't properly isolated by accident or on purpose, or some other thing was going on, and I still don't know. But that event messed up a lot of folks.
Oh, okay.
And the powers that be want to call it a whole bunch of other stuff, but that's just one singular event that I know that it wasn't as presented. People were negatively impacted. Nobody was really talking about it. There was a lot of compartmentalization, and I would say misinformation and disinformation being spread around, because to this day, I still don't know exactly what happened there, and I'm still looking into it.
Okay. And how many were there other people at the base when they switched the system on and this Christchurch, New Zealand devastating earthquake happened that sort of sensed like, oops, there's something related here?
I would not have been in that info stream at that time.
Okay. But since then, you've learned of folks who...
Yes, that absolutely, that was the thought going on. They were very aware. It was rather rapid, I think when you pull the trigger on something like that, you kind of know the target that you're looking for, and whether you hit the bullseye or on the paper, you're still aware.
So this array is 2 miles deep. How far across is it?
Oh, it's I would say a couple of miles across.
Okay.
Would be my best guesstimate. I don't have it on this map here. I'm sorry. Okay. I have a different map.
Yep. Well, the reason I bring that up, this is not something a lot of times I'll have military and intel or contractors come forward with information, and I sit on it until I get another point of corroboration. Because, you don't want something to just be purely apocryphal one-off, as we say in science, an N of one. So some years ago, I was given a lecture in Phoenix. And, this commonly happens. There were hundreds of people there. And at the end of it, there was this middle-aged man with 2 people with him, who were clearly with him as friends, protectors, who waited till everyone cleared out. And he told me that he had been in Alaska, deployed on a ship that was under contract. It was a private corporation under contract with the National Security Agency. And this ship had a special scalar electromagnetic system on it. And they went down to the area off of Indonesia over that subduction zone. And when they turned that system on, it caused that massive earthquake. I think it killed 250,000 people. And he was so disturbed by this that he went off the grid, got an old car without GPS, drove from Alaska to Phoenix with these 2 security people to hand this information off to me. He was shaken. There's no question that he was telling me the truth of what he knew about this. Now, again, whether that was an intentional or an incidental event, the implication from him was that they were testing a weapon system that could destabilize unstable areas of the Earth's crust and put them past the tipping point for an earthquake. And when you told me this story about this system being switched on and the Christchurch earthquake, I put that in there with this information from this guy who was on the ship and witnessed this happen, who took a lot of time and trouble to try to hand this information off to us.
Melting snow in Antarctica due to global climate change may have revealed signs of ancient human settlements on the icy continent. Some researchers believe that the disappearing snow is finally exposing the mysterious truth about the South Pole, and that ancient sailors may well have reached the continent hundreds, if not thousands of years before 19th century explorers. Their ancient settlements may be revealed in satellite images from NASA, which appear to show strange markings beneath the snow, some of which look like ancient structures, including mysterious pyramidal building. But how old are these enigmatic remains, and who built them? It was recently announced by scientists that a group of glaciers, which span an eighth of the East Antarctica coastline, are being melted by the warming seas. This area of the Antarctic stores a huge amount of ice, and if this were lost, would in the long term significantly raise global sea levels and drown coastal settlements around the world. According to Alex Gardner, a glaciologist at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California, the change doesn't seem random. It looks systematic. That hints at underlying ocean influences that have been incredibly strong in West Antarctica. Now we might be finding clear links of the ocean starting to influence East Antarctica. Heightened attention needs to be given to these glaciers. We need to better map the topography. Only then can we be more conclusive in determining whether these glaciers will enter a phase of rapid retreat or stabilize. In November 2019, NASA's Operation Icebridge, a survey of ice conditions in the Arctic, Antarctic and Alaska, completed its 11-year operational program. According to NASA's website, Icebridge is the largest airborne survey of Earth's polar ice ever flown. It yields an unprecedented three-dimensional view of the Arctic and Antarctic ice sheets, ice shelves, and sea ice. These flights provide a yearly multi-instrument look at the behavior of the rapidly changing features of the Greenland and Antarctic ice. Over its time of operation, Icebridge completed more than 900 flights between Greenland and Antarctica, along with more than 150 in Alaska, where a final mission was flown in 2020. The images and information obtained from this NASA project represent the only data set of its kind for scientists to study. Project manager Eugenia DeMarco stated, "Our data is freely available to anyone. I believe Icebridge and the data it has collected helps answer the question of what's going on with the physical world, and that is one of the biggest contributions Icebridge has provided over the years." It is a little surprising that more researchers are not studying this treasure trove of images of the icy continent, although one or two obviously have. It was recently announced on some news outlets that one NASA satellite image of the melting ice in Antarctica had revealed something mysterious lurking below the ice. Although there is some controversy over the genuineness of the images used, some researchers have identified signs of an ancient settlement, apparently about 1.4 miles beneath the ice on this photo. Some have noticed wall-like lines, blocks which look like man-made buildings, and a mysterious pyramid-like structure in the image. In another satellite image, this time from Google Earth, what appears to be the top of a large building measuring around 400 feet in width has been identified. The oval-shaped structure has been likened to the Motte and Bailey castles of the medieval period in Western Europe. The symmetrical layout of what appear to be walls has left many convinced that the structure could be an ancient man-made fort. What could these structures represent? Was there an ancient culture present in Antarctica that has remained undetected until now? Needless to say, the presence of ancient man-made structures in Antarctica would be a complete shock to the scientific community. Antarctica is the highest, driest, coldest and windiest continent on Earth, and unlike the Arctic regions, it's believed to have had no indigenous population of humans when modern man arrived there. But perhaps during short periods of time in the remote past, there was less ice on the continent, which gave people the opportunity to settle there, or maybe people somehow adapted to the icy environment and carved out a civilization on Antarctica. It is a fact, however, that there were periods in Earth's remote history when Antarctica was not covered by ice and would have been habitable. So it's not so outlandish to imagine previous settlement on the continent at some time in its ancient past. However, according to scientists, Antarctica was last free of ice at least 3 million years ago, long before hominids capable of settling in the continent arose. Another problem with ancient life on Antarctica is that humans did not develop the technology for reliable oceanic travel until around 2,000 years ago, at the earliest, so prehistoric settlements there would be unlikely. It's possible, though, that what appear to be settlement structures on satellite photos are a bit more recent. Perhaps they could still be ancient, but date to within the last 1,500 years or so. It's certainly possible that Antarctica could have been reached by sailors in prehistory, and perhaps they set up seasonal settlements or camps there. Maybe the remains of these camps are what we're seeing in the ice in modern satellite photos. But prehistoric sailors making a practical permanent settlement in Antarctica is perhaps unlikely due to the forbidding climate. The late Gavin Menzies, a British author and retired submarine lieutenant commander, wrote a number of controversial books promoting his claim that the Chinese sailed to America before Columbus. In a summary of his 2002 book, 1421, The Year China Discovered the World, he put forward his controversial theory, which included the discovery of Antarctica. On the 8th of February 1421, the largest fleet the world had ever seen sailed from its base in China, he said. The ship's 500-feet-long junks made from the finest teak and mahogany were led by Emperor Zhu Dai's loyal eunuch admirals. Their mission was to proceed all the way to the end of the earth to collect tribute from the barbarians beyond the seas and unite the whole world in Confucian harmony. Their journey would last over 2 years and circle the entire globe. When they returned, Zhu Dai had fallen from power and China was beginning its long self-imposed isolation from the world it had so recently embraced. The great ships rotted at their moorings and the records of their journeys were destroyed. Lost was the knowledge that Chinese ships had reached America 70 years before Columbus and circumnavigated the globe a century before Magellan. They had also discovered Antarctica, reached Australia 350 years before Cook, and solved the problem of longitude 300 years before the Europeans. Menzies' ideas about Chinese discoveries are not considered feasible by academics, but what about the ancient Polynesians? There are interesting stories about the Uti Rangiora, a 7th century AD Polynesian navigator from the island of Rarotonga, the largest of the Cook Islands, a nation of 15 islands in the central South Pacific. According to ancient Maori legends, around the year 650, Uite Rangiora led a fleet of large ocean-going canoes south until they reached a place of bitter cold where rock-like structures rose from a solid sea. He returned with stories of icebergs, naming the land Ti Tai Uka Apia, meaning sea foaming like arrowroot, comparing the similar characteristics of arrowroot powder with these sheets of floating ice and snow. This voyage is said to have happened before the Maori people settled in New Zealand. There's little doubt that the ancient Polynesian explorers encountered icebergs on their voyage, though whether they ventured far enough south to actually see an ice shelf is uncertain. But the possibility has to be entertained that this intrepid group of Polynesian explorers, or indeed some other wandering sailors, may well have landed on Antarctica hundreds of years before Europeans arrived there. Perhaps these ancient sailors constructed temporary settlements that are yet to be discovered by archaeologists in the frozen continent. On February the 6th, 2020, weather stations recorded the highest temperature on record for Antarctica. Thermometers located at the Esperanza Base on the northern edge of the Antarctic Peninsula reached an incredible 18.3 degrees Celsius, 64.9 degrees Fahrenheit, almost the same temperature as Los Angeles that day. Unsurprisingly, this warm weather caused extensive melting on nearby glaciers. But this was not a freak weather day, far from it. The 12-month period between October 2019 and September 20, known by scientists as the Arctic Meteorological Year, was the second warmest on record next to that of October 2015 to September 2016. However, there may be something positive to come out of this worrying news. When satellite images of this melting are made public, perhaps they will reveal further evidence of settlements on the continent, which otherwise would never have come to light. A NASA project called the Antarctic Impulsive Transient Antenna made news recently with what appears to be the discovery of a parallel universe above Antarctica, a universe where time is running backwards. There have also been stories of mysterious structures being found deep beneath the ice in the continent. So, just what is going on in Antarctica? Antarctica is the world's southernmost continent. It is also the world's highest, driest, windiest, coldest, and iciest continent. Antarctica is about 5.5 million square miles in size, and thick ice covers about 98% of the land. The continent is divided into East Antarctica, which is mainly a high ice-covered plateau, and West Antarctica, largely composed of an ice sheet covering an archipelago of mountainous islands. Knowledge about Antarctica has increased greatly in recent decades, with geologists, geophysicists, glaciologists, biologists, and other scientists having mapped and visited all of the continent's mountain regions. But there are still great mysteries to be discovered there. In May 2020, Antarctica hit the news in a sensational new way, when an article appeared claiming NASA had uncovered evidence for a parallel universe there. This data came from the Antarctic Impulsive Transient Antenna, ANITA, a NASA-funded experiment that has floated around the South Pole 4 times since 2006. It mainly looks for evidence of elusive particles called neutrinos crashing into the ice below and triggering a spray of particles that emits telltale radio waves. ANITA has not yet traced any such signals. However, the instrument has found radio signals produced by other types of particles from space known as cosmic rays as they crash into Earth. According to the report, low-energy subatomic neutrinos with a mass close to 0 can pass completely through the Earth, but higher-energy objects are stopped by the solid matter of our planet. That means that the high-energy particles can only be detected coming down from space. But the team's ANITA detected heavier particles, so-called tower neutrinos, which come up from the Earth. This bizarre finding would suggest that these particles are actually traveling backwards in time, suggesting evidence of a parallel universe. Explaining this signal requires the existence of an upside-down universe created in the same Big Bang as our own, and existing in parallel with it. In this mirror world, positive is negative, left is right, and time runs backwards. According to the Daily Star, there is a parallel universe right next to ours where all the rules of physics seem to be operating in reverse. Can this be real? Do we have evidence for a parallel universe existing in Antarctica? Unfortunately, it looks like some news agencies may have misinterpreted the evidence somewhat. The numerous parallel universe articles now online seem to originate to a story published by the New Scientist with the alarming headline, "We may have spotted a parallel universe going backwards in time." The article contains a discussion of the puzzling results from the ANITA experiment. Essentially, it was misinterpreted by a few publications that, it seems, just read the headline. The real story is about neutrinos. Particle physicist Peter Gorham, who is the principal investigator of ANITA, told Science Alert, "We have encountered a small number of anomalies in our data, and once we have exhausted all of the possible explanations within the standard model of physics, only then is it time to consider other ideas that push these boundaries. We are really not done here yet, certainly not at the point where parallel universes are necessary." Leading member of the ANITA experiment team Ibrahim Safa said, "We looked at these ANITA events and they can't be standard neutrinos. They were probably a result of our imperfect understanding of the Antarctic ice, but there's a chance some new physics phenomenon is responsible." In December 2017, it was reported that researchers had found a previously unknown huge canyon deep beneath the ice-covered continent. Using radar technology, scientists were able to look 5 kilometers beneath the snow and ice to discover this deep canyon. The feature, which was found near the Denman Glacier on the west of Antarctica, extends for more than 3,500 meters below sea level, almost as deep as the average depth of the ocean. This is also 8 times deeper than the shores of the Dead Sea, which is the lowest exposed landmass on Earth. Previous attempts to map the structure of the Denman Glacier have been unsuccessful, as the deep ice flow beneath the surface skewed results, representing it as much shallower than scientists now know it is. But the latest effort to create the map, known as the BED machine, combined ice flow information with seismic activity to create the detailed map. Matthew Morlingham, who studies ice sheet modeling at the University of California, told the BBC News, "There have been many attempts to sound the bed of Denman, but every time they flew over the canyon, they couldn't see it in the radar data." The trough is so entrenched that you get side echoes from the walls of the valley, and they make it impossible to detect the reflection from the actual bed of the glacier. Ultimately, Bed Machine Antarctica presents a mixed picture. Ice streams in some areas are relatively well protected by their underlying ground features, while others on retrograde beds are shown to be more at risk from potential marine ice sheet instability. In January 2020, Antarctica again hit the news when an image taken from Google Earth was published online. This sensational image seemed to suggest that there might actually be a huge, tall building standing on the ice in Antarctica. A video was uploaded to a YouTube channel, Mr. MBB33, and the paranormal researchers who own the channel suggest that the structure is as much as 2,000 feet in height and the width spans 6 football fields. The video on YouTube has received over 80,000 views so far, and viewers are clearly fascinated by what they think they can see in the image. Strange that all countries want to take over land, but no country claims Antarctica. I think there is something that they know that we don't, one commenter said. Another user suggested that something along the lines of the Project Iceworm was active in Antarctica. Project Iceworm was a top-secret United States Army program of the Cold War, which aimed to build a network of mobile nuclear missile launch sites under the Greenland ice sheet. Many people, however, believe this controversial image shows nothing more than a huge, oddly shaped block of ice. One ongoing mystery of Antarctica is the vast hole in the continent, which first appeared in the 1970s. Many paranormal researchers believe that this hole leads to a lost world beneath Antarctica, perhaps populated by strange creatures, or even that the hole leads to an underground alien base. In the early 1970s, when satellites first began taking photos of Earth, scientists noticed a mysterious hole in one of Antarctica's seasonal ice packs floating on the Lazarus Sea. But strangely, when the summer arrived, the gap disappeared. Was someone or something able to somehow close this massive hole? Was some unheard of extraterrestrial technology involved? For decades, this strange event went unexplained. But in 2017, during the continent's coldest winter months, when ice should have been at its thickest, a giant 9,500 square kilometer hole suddenly appeared in the same ice pack. 2 months later, it had grown a stunning 740% larger, before once again retreating with the summer ice. It's taken a long time, but scientists now think they finally understand why this keeps happening. Using satellite observations and reanalysis data, researchers from New York University, Abu Dhabi, have found that these transient holes, known as polyonas, seem to be scars from cyclonic storms. In September 2017, as warm air and cold air collided at the South Pole, the swirling inward winds of a cyclone, reaching 117 kilometers an hour and whipping up waves 16 meters high, pushed the Antarctic ice pack in all directions and away from the eye of the storm, like a drill into the water. These gaps are powerful influences of the atmosphere and a potential indicator of climate change. Atmospheric scientist Diana Francis stated, "Once opened, it works like a window through the sea ice, transferring huge amounts of energy during winter between the ocean and the atmosphere." Because of their large size, mid-sea polyonas are capable of impacting the climate regionally and globally as they modify the oceanic circulation. In 2017, an image of part of Antarctica directly south of Australia appeared online. This showed what some paranormal researchers believe to be a Motte and Bailey castle, a design of castle peculiar to the 10th-13th century Europe. The motte is a type of artificial mound topped with a wooden or stone structure known as a keep. The bailey is a fortified enclosure next to the motte. What was a medieval castle doing in Antarctica? Was it part of a parallel dimension? Could it have been transported there by aliens? The Antarctic structure was about 120 meters across, which made it somewhat large for a medieval castle, but anyway, it did possess 2 circles, the Motte and Bailey perhaps. One problem with the castle theory was that the whole structure appeared to be completely flat, without the significant earthworks, which in part define a Motte-and-Bailey castle. The mounds of such castles are particularly enduring across the centuries, but as researchers looked into the image, they noticed that the dark blue patches inside the rings were water above ice. The structure is most likely a pond or shallow lake that has frozen over during the winter and in spring, when the image was captured, had drained to some extent. This probably followed the melting or washing away of a naturally formed dam or plug. Some patterns and movements of ice and water are commonly seen wherever there is standing water with seasonal freezing. This explanation is a lot more likely than the presence of a 1,000-year-old castle belonging to a far distant culture. Despite the fact that some of Antarctica's secrets have been revealed, there is no doubt that in the future, this enigmatic continent will offer up many more fascinating mysteries to the world. Antarctica has been a continent shrouded in mystery for many years. As it stands, we still don't know too much about this icy landmass, and its past is as equally confusing as its present. Over the years, we've heard many rumors and theories about what could have happened on the continent many years ago. We've heard everything from stories of a lost civilization to theories of a secret Nazi bunker from World War II. Today, we'll be taking a look at some of these wild theories and learning if there's any truth behind them. Let us know about one of the craziest conspiracy theories you've ever heard in the comments. Who knows, maybe one of those theories will make it into a future video. In 1947, Admiral Richard E. Byrd led an expedition of military troops from the US, Britain and Australia to Antarctica titled the United States Navy Antarctic Development Program. The official story is that this was a straightforward mission to establish a research base on the remote continent. But is this the true story? Many UFO researchers aren't convinced. This expedition, or perhaps invasion, has come to be known by another name, Operation High Jump. Shortly after World War II, rumors began swirling that Hitler survived the war and had fled to Antarctica with a number of supporters. It's widely known that Hitler was deeply interested in the occult, and some even claim that his interest led him to making some otherworldly connections. It has been posited that the Nazis found an entrance into the inner Earth in Antarctica, and that they made some kind of alliance with a race of technologically advanced inner Earth beings. Operation High Jump comprised of 4,700 military personnel, 6 helicopters, 6 Martin PBM flying boats, 2 seaplanes, 15 assorted aircraft, 13 Navy supply ships, and 1 aircraft carrier. It seems like a lot of resources to simply establish a research base. After all of this preparation, the mission was surprisingly cut short. The official explanation was that the troops had to leave because winter was coming, but others claim the truth is that the German secret space program's technology was far too advanced and the US forces were defeated. As more and more information becomes unclassified, it's possible we may someday know the true story. Antarctica has always been a place that few humans have ever seen. Only scientists, support personnel, and the extremely wealthy and elite have the resources to travel there. But in recent years, everyday people have been using available technology to make some pretty shocking observations on the desolate continent. As anonymous, self-proclaimed Earth Watchman discovered an enormous cave-like opening off an island off the coast of Antarctica using Google Earth. The opening looks much too precise to be something created by nature alone. The investigator who spotted the opening claims to have measured the anomaly using Google Earth tools and that the entrance is over 150 feet wide. What's even stranger is that this so-called cave was only visible on Google Earth for 6 months, then it mysteriously vanished. What covered it up? Was it natural causes, an avalanche, or was it digitally removed because the public stumbled upon something they were never meant to see? It has long been our understanding that Antarctica is the only continent on Earth that has never had a native human population. However, scientific study has discovered that millions of years ago, Antarctica was perhaps a semi-tropical climate. Fossil evidence has revealed that about 55 million years ago, Antarctica was covered in dense forest and even supported the growth of palm trees along its coast. But according to what is known of human history, it seems impossible that prehistoric humans ever inhabited Antarctica. But some topographical photos that NASA have made led some people to challenge this long-held belief. The photos taken in 2016 show the ruins of what appears to be an ancient city. Leading archaeologist Ashoka Tripathi of the Department of Archaeology at the University of Calcutta believes the images show clear evidence of an ancient human settlement beneath the ice sheet. Tripathi has been quoted saying, "These are clearly features of some sort of human-made structure, resembling some sort of pyramidal structure. The pattern clearly shows nothing we should expect from natural geomorphological formations found in nature. We clearly have here evidence of human engineering. The only problem is that these photographs were taken in Antarctica under 2 kilometers of ice. That is clearly the puzzling part. We do not have any explanation for this at the moment." Recently, images of pyramid-like structures found in Antarctica went viral. Some scientists say these are simply mountains and that a freeze-thaw cycle of erosion has given them their distinctive pyramidal shape. Others disagree. When comparing the structure of these possible pyramids to other mountains that have eroded from a freeze-thaw cycle, such as the Swiss Alps and Ellsworth, there are virtually no similarities. The angles of the Antarctic pyramids are strangely precise to have been formed by nature alone. There remains no scientific consensus on the true origins of these structures, but if they were in fact made by intelligent hands, they might be the oldest pyramids on our planet. So the question remains, who put them there? A possible former US Navy whistleblower claimed to have some insight. In January of 2015, UFO researcher Linda Moulton Howe received a letter from an alleged retired US Navy engineer, former first-class flight non-commissioned officer. The whistleblower, who refers to himself as Brian, claims that he served in the Navy with a squadron called Antarctic Development Squadron 6. He worked with this squadron since 1983 and then retired in March 1997. Being a flight engineer, he was able to fly for more than 4,000 hours and saw things that most people can't even imagine. Brian's home base was the McMurdo station, which is a 3.5-hour flight from the South Pole station. The crew would often have flights back and forth between the two stations. On several flights to and from the McMurdo South Pole base, the crew saw flying saucers that darted around the tops of the Antarctic Trans-Mountain Range, almost exactly at the same point every time they flew between this area. Brian also claims that during his service, his squadron was never allowed to fly over a certain area, which was 5 miles from the McMurdo station. However, once, due to a medical evacuation, his crew did fly over the forbidden area, and what they saw was a large hole in the ice, as if there was an entrance to a huge base. After this mission, the crew was debriefed by intelligence agents from Washington, D.C., and told explicitly not to talk about this area. On one other occasion, his crew once again approached the restricted area, but subsequently had some electrical faults on the aircraft and experienced some mysterious anomalies. They were told to leave the area immediately and report to their squadron commander. After this incident, the pilot commander of the squadron was sent away, exempted from the mission assignment, as well as the crew. Another even more bizarre incident whistleblower Brian revealed was that, at one point, a group of scientists and their equipment were doing research in an area not far from the main base. The group always stayed in communication with command, and after 2 weeks, Brian's crew flew out to the field to see if the scientists were in need of supplies and to check their general status. But strangely, the scientists had completely disappeared, and there was no sign of their presence. The radio was on, and Brian tried to call McMurdo Station to verify that it was working properly. The plane crew was then ordered to return to McMurdo by their commander. A week later, a scientist contacted McMurdo and requested the crew return to the camp again to pick them up. As soon as the team of scientists was loaded, everyone was silent. They didn't speak to the crew of the plane and seemed frightened. As soon as the plane landed in McMurdo, the scientists were put on another plane and sent to New Zealand. The crew that remained in Antarctica never heard of them again. They completely disappeared. Their equipment was brought back from the field and then quarantined and sent back to the United States. Brian claims that very often there would be discussions between the flight crews of different bases, and some crew members had heard from some scientists that in the restricted area were some EBEs, extraterrestrial biological entities, that work and interact with scientists. According to them, Antarctica is the site of a huge secret underground base where humans and what we call aliens work together. Could our understanding of ancient history be completely wrong? Is it possible that we're not alone, not only in the universe, but even on our own planet? If the ice in Antarctica continues melting at its current rate, who knows what may be revealed in the years to come? Recently declassified US spy and weather satellite photographs taken above most areas of the world have been causing a stir amongst archaeologists. Amongst other findings, the photos reveal long-lost civilizations in the Near and Middle East, mysterious structures, holes in the ice, and evidence of early ice shelf collapse in Antarctica. Using photos from the covert Corona satellite program and other declassified satellite photos, initially designed with espionage in mind, researchers have identified thousands of ancient sites, some of which may well be structures made by previously unknown cultures or civilizations. In the 1950s, the West was able to obtain very little information about activities inside the Soviet Union due to the generally closed nature of Soviet society, which prevented the movement of foreigners around the country, and the censorship exercised over newspapers and other publications. Early in 1958, just a few months after the Soviets launched the first Sputnik into space, President Eisenhower authorized a top-priority reconnaissance satellite project managed jointly by the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, and the U.S. Air Force. Its task was to launch into orbit a camera-carrying spacecraft that would take photographs of the Soviet Union and then safely return the film to Earth. This covert spy satellite was dubbed Corona by the CIA. To disguise its real purpose, the satellite program was given the cover name Discoverer and designated as a scientific research program. Corona was in effect a replacement for the U-2, America's high-flying reconnaissance spy plane, which had made flights across the Soviet Union throughout the 1950s unchallenged, as the Soviets did not possess surface-to-air missiles capable of reaching the 15 miles plus altitude of the U-2. However, by the middle of the decade, the US government began to realize that the Soviets would soon develop such an anti-aircraft weapon, so began to look for an effective replacement. Although Corona was only meant to be a temporary solution to the problem of surveillance, spurred on by the success of Soviet missiles, in the end it proved to be the mainstay of the US strategic surveillance program for over 10 years. But things did not begin smoothly for Corona. There were multiple failed launches throughout 1959 and 1960 due to a variety of reasons. But in August 1960, the first Corona images were returned to Earth, showing 64 previously unknown Soviet airfields. A new Corona satellite was launched on average every 6 weeks, and in the 10 years of the program, a total of 145 were launched, of which at least 120 were successful. A total of 850,000 images were taken during the years between 1960 and 1972 when Corona was in operation. The satellite's camera systems relied on special, high-definition film developed secretly by Kodak. An exposed roll of this ultra-sensitive film would have to be physically recovered from its satellite in order to be processed, which involved individual film canisters being jettisoned from orbit. As the film fell back to Earth, a minuscule parachute would open, generally somewhere over the Pacific, and the canister would then drift back down through the atmosphere. A US military airplane armed with the skyhook technology would then catch the film in mid-air as it descended, bringing it back to the ground for processing. So secret was the Corona program that the first public acknowledgement of it, or any American military surveillance satellites, was not made until the 1st of October 1978 at the Kennedy Space Center, when President Jimmy Carter stated, "Photographic reconnaissance satellites have become an important stabilizing factor in world affairs in the monitoring of arms control agreements. They make an immense contribution to the security of all nations." Further information on the relevant programs and satellites was not made available for over 15 years, after this in the mid-1990s, when the American Corona program was mostly declassified. But it was only after heavy lobbying from Robert McCormack Adams, an archaeologist who was at the time secretary of the Smithsonian Institution, that the declassification order was finally realized. Recently, the spy photos taken by Corona have been used in a way which could not have been imagined by the originators of the secret program. Today, those high-resolution images represent a valuable picture of an earlier planet. According to Jason a Harvard University archaeologist who works with Corona images, Corona is like a time machine for us. In a lot of cases, they lead us to landscapes that are gone, that don't exist anymore. Archaeologists are particularly interested in what Corona images reveal about areas of the Near and Middle East which have undergone swift development over the past 2 or 3 decades, destroying a vast number of archaeological settlements, ancient roads, and irrigation systems. The Corona spy photos have been especially useful in identifying ancient Assyrian sites, today located in modern northern Iraq, southeastern Turkey, northwestern Iran, and northeastern Syria. According to Jason it has been possible to map the colossal irrigation systems constructed by the kings of Assyria to support their new capitals of Nimrud and Nineveh. In fact, using the spy photos, has been able to identify and map over 60 kilometers of canals across a wide part of Assyria, many of which have never been recognized on the ground before. At the University of Arkansas, researchers at the Center for Advanced Spatial Technologies have compiled a publicly available image database of 2,214 Corona photographs that identify 803 archaeological sites. Dartmouth College anthropology professor Jesse Kasana spent years scanning the declassified files for evidence of past civilizations in the Middle East. He said, "The images are invaluable, because 50 years ago, when the photos were taken, the countryside was far less industrialized. Ancient details remain visible if you know what to look for. We were able to document 10,000 previously unknown archaeological sites that through the history of 150 years of archaeological work in the Middle East, no one has ever documented." The Corona spy photos are not the only 1960s satellite photos being utilized for modern research. Recently, Earth scientists David Gallagher and Garrett Campbell uncovered 25 boxes of magnetic tapes and photographic film from the 3 Nimbus weather satellites launched in the 1960s from the National Climatic Data Center archive in North Carolina. The 1964 Nimbus satellite images of the southern coast of Norway and the Pyrenees are thought to be the first images of Europe taken from space. A few satellite photos taken over Antarctica in 1964 appear to show the remains of structures under the ice, though no one is sure what civilization these buildings belong to. They may be abandoned 20th century structures, or they could be much earlier. Some have suggested hundreds or even thousands of years earlier. Only access to more digitalized satellite photos of the Antarctic, which are not yet available, will help in identifying what these strange shapes under the ice may be. It's possible that the CIA's Corona satellite took earlier pictures of Europe, the Soviet Union, and the Antarctic, but those images have not as yet been made public. Indeed, to date, only about 5% of the images from the Corona program have been scanned, and each photograph costs $30 to digitize, so it may be some time before everything is available to study. The Nimbus satellite photos also give scientists their earliest look at Antarctica before global warming, and in the 1964 photos of the continent, they reveal a greater extent of sea ice than at any time since. But Gallagher and Campbell were extremely surprised when they came upon images which appeared to show a mysterious hole in the ice. Although holes in the Arctic ice are a common phenomenon today as the Arctic warms, but in the colder 1960s, a large patch of thin or melted ice was unexpected, and nothing like it was seen again until the 21st century. Since the images of the hole were made public, there have been various interpretations as to what it represents. Some researchers believe that there is something ancient lurking beneath the ice which caused the huge hole to form. Others that it represents the entrance to a secret tunnel to another location. The two scientists believe that as Antarctica in its past had a different climate, around 50 million years ago, there was the possibility that running water existed on the surface. The team think that water got trapped as lakes, perhaps 2 or 3 miles below the ice sheet, in what they have called ghost lakes. Professor Frank Muller-Karger of the University of South Florida explained, "We call them ghost lakes because they're invisible to us until something happens and they reveal themselves." So the scientific hypothesis is that the hole was created due to these lakes, which are believed to be spread under huge areas of Antarctica. Unsurprisingly, some researchers do not agree and think there is much more going on in Antarctica than has ever publicly been admitted. Antarctica has long been a place of mystery and intrigue for those of us who are willing to look beyond the usual mundane actions of everyday lives. This gland of ice contains clues to the vast and ancient history of our planet, and many of these clues have yet to be discovered. We all have a somewhat basic understanding of the ice-covered landscape and the animals that survive in what is undoubtedly the coldest, driest and windiest continent on our planet. But this blanket of ice is one of the largest landmasses on Earth, and with a whopping 5.5 million miles of dangerous and basically uninhabitable terrain, it undoubtedly has more secrets than we can imagine. Awaiting discoveries lurk beneath the ice sheets, and scientists are exploring and investigating new data that could support life we previously knew nothing about. Research has also come to light that indicates there are some parts of Antarctica which may have enough heat to allow a human to wear a t-shirt. According to the Anu Fenner School of Environment and Society's highly acclaimed biogeographer, Dr. Ceridwen Fraser, whose research has helped develop our understanding of past climate change in Antarctica, there are such places like that in Antarctica. Antarctica's Ross Island hosts an active volcano called Mount Erebus, and Fraser states that over several years, the steam from this volcano has created a network of caves under the ice that can reach up to 25 degrees Celsius, perfectly comfortable for small wildlife to survive. Further analysis of the soil samples taken from these caves revealed DNA results, some of which were unexpected. While the majority of the samples were identified and corroborated with plants and animals that are already known to inhabit other areas of Antarctica, the rest of the samples were unidentifiable. This discovery would suggest there are new species of animal life and plant life living beneath the ice that are previously unknown. Previous research has shown evidence of fungi and bacteria in the caves that may suggest there are more to be discovered. This underground network of caves beneath the ice are not very easy to access, so exploration is quite a daunting task, and it's yet to be uncovered exactly how many of these cave systems are under the ice. The mysteries of our planet's history and its creation have always fascinated us, and we're forever attempting to update our knowledge of the world around us. A team of researchers recently endeavored a 3-day explorative drilling operation down through thousands of feet of ice into what is called Antarctica's Lost Lake. While we may envisage this continent as a single massive sheet of ice, there are actually hidden treasures in the form of natural lakes under this surface. This particular one is called Lake Mercer. They're called Lost Lakes because up until now they were completely inaccessible. But the team of researchers that accessed Lake Mercer drilled a hole over 1 kilometer deep through the ice sheet until they reached this body of water. While the drill hole is only a couple of feet wide, this was enough to create an avenue to the body of water beneath, which will allow the scientists to get samples for analysis and possibly new and exciting data. So why are our scientists so intrigued with the Lost Lakes of Antarctica? We tend to forget that Antarctica was once a lush, tropical paradise with a range of flora and fauna that is evident in fossils found under the ice. According to scientists who've discovered fossilized plants containing charcoal, which date back as far as the dinosaurs, during the third and final period of the Mesozoic era, the Cretaceous period, there was an era where wildfires were rampant. The Cretaceous high fire period was a global event that reached almost all continental masses during that period in Earth's history. And what the scientists discovered was that these fires managed to make their way as far as Antarctica. While rolling green hills and lush vegetation were once there, there's now nothing but ice. But this doesn't mean that it was a less hostile environment than it is now. Erratic and destructive volcanic activity would have erupted, creating havoc and starting wildfires that would have torn through the continent. Scientists delve into the unknown by accessing this lost lake in a bid to gather whatever information they can. The more data that is harvested, the more it will add to whatever is already known of the geologic activity that transpires in and around Antarctica. It will also help researchers to gain more knowledge of the scientific hydrology of the subglacial lakes. Hydrology is an extremely important science, as it is the study of the movement, distribution and management of water on Earth and on other planets, including the water cycle, water resources, and environmental watershed sustainability. Although Lake Mercer and other lost lakes are not visible on the surface, it doesn't mean that they don't sustain life. Scientists are devoted to the task of understanding more about how these hidden bodies of water move and circulate underneath these massive sheets of compacted ice, how these waters expedite the flow of carbon and other organic materials that are necessary for the biological processes that occur in these freezing conditions is something they will explore in depth. The fact that these hidden lakes have been so inaccessible up to now means that they have never been explored before. The possibilities of discovering new species of animal or plant life or microorganisms with the analysis of any samples gathered is endless. In 2013, researchers drilled through 800 meters of ice to reach Lake Willans successfully. They drilled 4 kilometers down and reached the first level of Lake Vostok before conceding defeat. Another fruitless attempt was made as they tried to access Lake Ellsworth when the boreholes were unable to permeate the dense sheet of ice. On appearance, the Antarctic is a desolate and inhospitable landscape, but this barren land is host to hundreds of these large unexplored bodies of water silently circulating underneath the dense ice sheet of this hostile landscape. The importance of this research cannot be emphasized enough. The significance of Antarctica in relation to the regulation of our global climate should not be miscalculated. What is happening to our ecosystem as a consequence of warming temperatures and rising sea levels can possibly be mitigated with further exploration and a deeper understanding of the complexities of this mainly uninhabitable land. For numerous decades, radar instruments have scanned across miles and miles of the continent of Antarctica in search of data. Microwave pulses are bounced off the surface to peer through the ice in the hope of tracing the underlying layout and topography. An incredible discovery was made by combining data gathered by aircraft satellites with ice-penetrating radar technology towed by snowmobiles. Researchers discovered a huge gorge that was originally an ancient mountain range that is deeper than the Grand Canyon. Now stratified with layers of 1,000-year-old glaciers, the colossal valley reaches 1.9 miles deep by 200 miles long and is more than 15.5 miles wide. To put this into context, the Grand Canyon is only about a mile deep. Dr. Neil Ross, who is a geology professor at Newcastle University, sees this find as incredibly fortuitous. The team of researchers and scientists spent 3 years mapping out the subglacial mountain range before the discovery, but never expected to find this valley. He explained that although they had been able to gather data from either end of this vast hidden canyon, they had no clue as to what lay between the 2 points. Satellite data was used to fill in the missing information, and although the valley is covered by miles and miles of ice, it's so big it can be seen from space. After analyzing all the data, it appears this valley was formed millions of years ago by a small ice field, like those of the Antarctic Peninsula. Some years later, a large hole was also found beneath the ice during the study of the natural and artificial areas of the ice-laden landscape. This hole was not as deep, but still measured 0.6 miles and is also impressively longer than the Grand Canyon, which makes it an incredibly significant discovery. There is so much on this beautiful planet that we call home that we have yet to discover and explore. Antarctica, as one of the largest landmasses by far, has so many mysteries that are constantly being revealed. Scientists have begun constructing a sort of time capsule, a black box if you will. This is being made durable enough to outlive humanity on this planet. It will contain information on our histories and evidence of our existence if or after the human race becomes extinct. This black box will be our legacy and allow us to detail humanity's accomplishments, as well as afford a narrative to future civilizations as to what took place in the human race's cycle on this planet. The Project Earth's black box is to be completed by early 2022 and will record every step humanity takes towards our own possible destruction. It will be constructed from an immense monolith of 3-inch thick steel and placed in a remote location in Tasmania. The black box will use a system of internet-connected storage devices powered by solar power on the roof in case the power grid fails. It will be similar to the black boxes used to identify the cause of airplane crashes. As we ponder on the mysteries of the icy continent of Antarctica, it is chilling to know that in its history there were fires spreading across this once green and lush landscape. The Maori, who are the indigenous people of New Zealand, traveled to Antarctica 1,000 years before any Europeans. This civilization arrived in New Zealand from East Polynesia in the 14th century in canoes. They had lived in secluded, separate existence in Polynesia in total isolation and developed their own diverse culture, unlike that of other Eastern Polynesian tribes. Whilst their language, mythology and techniques are all noted and recorded in cultural history, what has been overlooked is their journey to Antarctica. Relatively new research suggests that this adept culture may have reached the icy continent as early as the 7th century. This would have been long before the first European missions ventured out towards Antarctica. A new study, which was published in the Journal of the Royal Society of New Zealand, has taken a more panoramic view of history and offers a different perspective. The evidence that was previously neglected has now been taken into consideration, and it has connected some of the gaps that were missing. New sources have been examined, including Maori legends told down through the generations and documented events on carvings and weavings. Conservation biologist Priscilla Wahe, who is lead documenter of the study of the New Zealand Government Research Institute, Manaki Wanua, has said that by piecing all the clues together, the picture clearly shows the connection to Antarctica. These links have always been there since the earliest forms of migration and travel were recorded. Numerous Maori legends and stories relate to the early adventures and exploration of the Antarctic, and some of the Maori tribal groups, which include the Ingata Rurara and Te Atiawa, share the voyage of an explorer called Hui Te Ingoria. In the legend, this explorer sailed his vessel to Antarctica, where he found a misty and dark place that never saw the sun. The narrative also describes the Arctic landscape, icebergs, and marine animals. Until this study came to light, our comprehension and understanding of the Antarctic and any exploratory adventures to it were based on the missions and accomplishments of European explorers. Many historical articles even cite that the first vessel to spot the continent was a Russian voyager in January of 1820, although we now know that there were such early depictions gathered by the Maori. Wahe, in an interview, told the New Zealand Herald that some of the Maori people have been critiquing this date for years, knowing they were privy to prior records of exploration of the Antarctic. Researchers are now looking for the history books to be amended, considering the information that is available now. If viewers will pardon the pun, this information is probably only the tip of the iceberg. What other secrets of the past are hidden underneath this inhospitable continent of ice? With the constant progression in machinery and the major advancements in technology, who knows what we will learn from our planet's history that has been frozen in time. Newly released data from a European satellite has revealed the tectonic underworld below the frozen southernmost continent. Researchers have created incredible 3D maps of Antarctica's tectonic underworld and found that the ice has been concealing the remains of an ancient supercontinent's spectacular destruction. It's well known to scientists that the exact geological makeup of Antarctica's innermost land, located in East Antarctica, is yet to be discovered. What else awaits discovery in this mysterious continent? Antarctica today is divided into 3 distinct regions: East Antarctica, West Antarctica, and the Antarctic Peninsula, with each area containing a different topography beneath. The ice of the Antarctic Peninsula, for example, conceals a spine of mountains projecting northwest from the inside of the continent. East Antarctica, the largest area, includes flat plains as well as mountains. The Gamburtsev mountain range is located here. Its mountains extend for 750 miles, with peaks rising above 11,200 feet, roughly the same height as the European Alps. This range is completely covered by over 2,000 feet of ice. The ground in West Antarctica is almost completely below sea level. The ocean bowl beneath this section was created during the last ice age, when the weight of the ice, which was considerably thicker at the time, pushed down on the bedrock. But what else lies beneath the ice on this enigmatic continent? In November 2018, news outlets around the world reported that incredible data about Antarctica had been obtained from a defunct European satellite. Launched on March 17, 2009, the Gravity Field and Steady-State Ocean Circulation Explorer, the GOCE, was the first satellite of the Living Planet program, which is the European Space Agency's Earth Science program. It orbited Earth between March 2009 and November 2013, and its task was to measure the pull of the Earth's gravity more precisely than any mission before. Using data from that satellite, the researchers from Kiel University in Germany and the British Antarctic Survey examined Antarctica under the ice. Analysis revealed rocky zones known as cratons in the Earth's lithosphere, a zone between the planet's crust and mantle. Cratons are the core regions of most tectonic plates. The team also found orogons, which are folded-up regions of plates that are the precursors to mountain ranges. It's by studying the number of cratons and orogons that scientists are able to compare the continental plates beneath Antarctica with other regions around the world. GOCE's newly discovered cratons are believed by scientists to represent the remains of ancient continents, and they reveal important information about how Earth's modern-day continents are structured, especially Antarctica. But data from the decommissioned satellite not only produced a global gravity map, but also revealed local gravity changes with a resolution as small as around 50 miles. Co-author of the study, Fausto Ferracacoli, science leader of geology and geophysics at the British Antarctic Survey, said, "These gravity images are revolutionizing our ability to study the least understood continent on Earth, Antarctica. In East Antarctica, we see an exciting mosaic of geological features that reveal fundamental similarities and differences between the crust beneath Antarctica and other continents it was joined to until 160 million years ago." One interesting piece of information the team found was that East Antarctica is made up of old cratons and younger orogons. The researchers found similar structures to this in Australia and India. However, West Antarctica has a thinner and more homogeneous crust, which more closely resembles the southern tip of South America. The gravity map the team assembled from the data reveals that East Antarctica is made up of multiple cratons, which are the cores of long-lost continents. The scientists used data from other satellites to essentially strip Antarctica of its vast layers of ice so that they were able to focus on the bedrock beneath. When they examined this layer, the team found evidence of the continent's history as part of Gondwana, a supercontinent made of the modern southern hemisphere continents. The matching shapes of the coastlines of Western Africa and Eastern South America were first officially noted by Francis Bacon in 1620, at a time when Africa and the New World first became available to study. But the idea that not all the continents of the southern hemisphere were once joined in one great supercontinent was not put forward in detail until hundreds of years later. In 1912, by German meteorologist and pioneer of polar research Alfred Wegener. He's remembered today as the originator of continental drift theory, which he put forward in 1912, suggesting that the continents are slowly drifting around the Earth. But Wegener also convinced that all of the Earth's continents were once part of a single great landmass, which he called Pangaea. Its name is derived from the Greek Pangaea, meaning all the Earth. Wegener proposed that Pangaea existed about 240 million years ago, but by about 200 million years ago it began breaking up. Over millions of years, Pangaea eventually separated into pieces that gradually moved away from one another. These pieces slowly formed the continents we recognize today. Nowadays, scientists believe that several supercontinents like Pangaea have formed and broken up over the course of the Earth's history. These include Pannotia, which formed about 600 million years ago, and Rodinia, a supercontinent that assembled around 1 billion years ago and broke up 750 to 633 million years ago. In terms of Wegener's Pangaea, Gondwana comprised the southern half of this supercontinent. According to plate tectonic evidence, the supercontinent of Gondwana was assembled by continental collisions in the late Precambrian, about 1 billion to 542 million years ago, and broke up around 180 million years ago. It eventually split into the landmass we know as Africa, South America, Australia, Antarctica, the Indian subcontinent, Madagascar, and the Arabian Peninsula. Even though the continent existed many millions of years ago, some paranormal researchers have put forward the idea that Gondwana may have been the original model for the lost continent of Atlantis, with the knowledge of existence somehow being passed down through the ages. Gondwana's formed into its final shape about 500 million years ago. By this time, primitive multicellular organisms had evolved, as revealed by the rare fossils left from this period, which include segmented worms, frond-like organisms and round creatures similar to modern jellyfish. When Gondwana represented Earth's southerly supercontinent, the planet was a lot warmer than today, and crucially, there was no Antarctic ice sheet. It was also a time, the Jurassic period, when dinosaurs still roamed the Earth and huge areas of Gondwana were covered with lush rainforest. The first stage of the breakup of the subcontinent began in the early Jurassic period, about 180 million years ago. This new information contained in this gravity map gives scientists more knowledge about how the Antarctic continent was formed. But perhaps just as importantly, it tells scientists what will happen to it in the future. Antarctica is melting at a fairly rapid rate, and being aware of its underlying structure can tell us how this will happen and perhaps how it will eventually recover. In December 2019, it was revealed that a new map of the mountains, valleys and canyons concealed beneath Antarctica's ice had revealed the deepest land on Earth, and would help predict future ice loss. The new NASA map, called Bed Machine Antarctica, collects together ice movement measurements, seismic measurements, radar and other data points to assemble what is hoped to be the most detailed picture ever of Antarctica's hidden features. According to NASA's website, Bed Machine is a new Antarctic bed topography product based on ice thickness data from 19 different research institutes dating back to 1967, encompassing nearly 1 million line miles of radar soundings. Bed Machine relies on the fundamental physics-based method of mass conservation to estimate what lies beneath the radar sounding lines, utilizing highly detailed information on ice flow motion from satellite data that dictates how ice moves. Originally, NASA's bed map was a result of work led by the British Antarctic Survey, where researchers assembled decades' worth of geophysical measurements. In operation from 2013, BedMap 2, like the original BedMap, was a collection of 3 data sets: surface elevation, ice thickness, and bedrock topography. One important discovery made by Bed Machine Antarctica was of previously unknown topographical features, such as the broad ridges that shield the glaciers flowing across the Transantarctic Mountains, which separate East and West Antarctica. Bed Machine also discovered the world's deepest land canyon below Denman Glacier in East Antarctica, an astonishing 11,000 feet below sea level. As a comparison, the lowest exposed region of land on the Earth is the Dead Sea, which sits a mere 1,419 feet below sea level. The new NASA map is a vital resource that will help scientists predict exactly which areas of Antarctica are at highest risk of sliding into the ocean in the next few decades or even centuries, and which parts might in fact be more stable than previously thought. Who knows what else such Antarctica mapping projects might turn up in the future.
The scientific discovery of fossilized trees dating back more than 260 million years has shocked the scientific community. Together with other recently discovered fossilized plant and tree discoveries on Antarctica, these finds suggest something that should not be: that the world's coldest, driest continent was once green and forested. Amongst other things, scientists have had to come up with an explanation of how trees were able to survive within a few degrees of latitude of the South Pole itself, where it's dark for 6 months of the year. But what does all this mean for scientific theories about Antarctica? Will they have to be changed? An ancient forested Antarctica. Over 100 years ago, Royal Naval officer and explorer Robert Falcon Scott's ill-fated expedition to Antarctica discovered fossils of plants on the Beardmore Glacier less than 310 miles from the South Pole. The expedition's chief scientist, Edward Wilson, recorded these remarkable findings in his diary, writing that most of the bigger leaves were like beech leaves in shape and venation. At the time, these discoveries were dismissed by scientists as mistaken or exaggerated, their significance almost completely ignored for over 100 years. However, over the last decade or so, a few scientists have begun to suspect that Edward Wilson may have been onto something. Even so, when proof was finally discovered, they were as shocked as anyone. The fact is that Antarctica has not always been a forbidden land of ice. Millions of years ago, when the continent was still part of the huge southern hemisphere landmass called Gondwana, forests grew near the South Pole. From around 400 million to 14 million years ago, the southern continent was a very different and much greener place than Antarctica is today, with a much warmer climate. The warmth came from the size of the landmass itself, with Gondwana land keeping away the cold currents that encircle Antarctica today. Professor Jane Francis of the University of Leeds in the UK has spent 10 field seasons in Antarctica collecting fossil plants and received the Polar Medal from the Queen in 2002. She is still in awe at the thought of a green Antarctica. I still find the idea that Antarctica was once forested absolutely mind-boggling. We take it for granted that Antarctica has always been a frozen wilderness, but the ice caps only appeared relatively recently in geological history. One of the professor's most important fossil discoveries was made in the Transantarctic Mountains, where, high up on glaciated peaks, she and her team found a sedimentary layer packed full of fragile leaves and twigs. Analysis showed that these fossils were the remains of stunted bushes of beech dating back to mere 3 to 5 million years old. Consequently, they were some of the last plants to have lived on Antarctica before the deep freeze set in. But other fossil discoveries from the continent reveal the incredible fact that truly subtropical forests existed on Antarctica during much earlier times, during the age of dinosaurs. According to Dr. Vanessa Bowman, who works with Francis at the University of Leeds, go back 100 million years ago, and Antarctica was covered in lush rainforests similar to those that exist in New Zealand today. We commonly find whole fossilized logs that must have come from really big trees. But the strangest and most inexplicable characteristic of these polar forests was their adaptation to the Antarctic light regime. Close to the pole, in winter, it is always night, while in the summer the sun shines even at midnight. Professor David Bierling of the University of Sheffield explained the problem that these Antarctic trees must have faced. During prolonged periods of warm winter darkness, trees consume their food store, and if this goes on for too long, they will eventually starve. To understand how these Antarctic trees survived against such seemingly insurmountable odds, Professor Bierling investigated the types of plants that once grew on Antarctica. What we did was grow seedlings of these trees in blacked-out greenhouses where we could simulate Antarctic light conditions. We also raised temperature and CO2 concentration to match ancient growing conditions. We found that trees made so much food during the summers that this eventually caused photosynthesis to slow down. As a result, they couldn't fully take advantage of the long, hot summers for photosynthesis. So, Professor Bierling's experiments demonstrated that trees were able to cope extremely well with the highly unusual environment. These hardy ancient trees were also able to withstand alternating months of pure sunlight and darkness, before eventually succumbing to history's greatest mass extinction. The discovery of fossil trees. In 2016, Eric Gulbranson, a paleoecologist from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and his team discovered the oldest polar forest on record from the southern polar region. Although the forest has not yet been precisely dated, Gulbranson believes it probably flourished about 280 million years ago before being swiftly buried in volcanic ash, which fortunately preserved it down to the cellular level. In Gulbranson's words, "They're actually some of the best preserved fossil plants in the world. The fungi in the wood itself were probably mineralized and turned into stone within a matter of weeks, in some cases probably while the tree was still alive. These things happen incredibly rapid. You could have witnessed it firsthand if you were there. Ancient fossil trees that date back 100 million years can also be found in a small part of Alexander Island on the west coast of the Antarctic Peninsula, with logs up to 23 feet high still standing upright. Incredibly, the roots of these coniferous trees are still attached to the carbonaceous soil deposits today. Scientists from Rice University in Houston, Texas, undertook research on fossilized from the Antarctic Peninsula, and were extremely surprised to discover that the region was covered in tundra up to 12 million years ago. The continent's gigantic ice sheets began forming about 38 million years ago, with the Antarctic Peninsula the last area to be covered in ice. There has always been controversy in the scientific community about how quickly this glaciation took place. Scientists have now determined the exact species of plant that existed on the Antarctic Peninsula 12 million years ago, and concluded from fossil record that there was a long, gradual process of glaciation over the peninsula. In 2018, more new forests were discovered by researchers from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee on the frozen slopes of the Transantarctic Mountains. Here, they discovered gray rocks containing fossils from Antarctica's ancient forested past. The team discovered fossil fragments of 13 trees that are well over 260 million years old, showing that this forest flourished at the end of the Permian period, before the first dinosaurs walked the Earth. Then came the Permian extinction. Many geologists and paleoecologists believe that the Permian extinction occurred over the course of 15 million years during the latter part of the Permian period, 299 million years to 252 million years ago. What caused this great extinction of 90% of the world's species at the time is still shrouded in mystery, though we know it was triggered by a volcanic event. However, the team from the University of Wisconsin actually discovered 5 new fossil forests that would have lived into and beyond the Permian extinction interval. These forests may give us vital information about this mysterious extinction event, according to Eric L. Bronson. These new findings tell us how these organisms were reacting or responding to the climatic or environmental changes that were taking place during the extinction crisis. Having a fossilized record of the extinction interval is our only understanding of how life on the planet goes through such an event. A rainforest during the age of dinosaurs. In April 2020, it was revealed that scientists had discovered the remains of temperate rainforests which flourished in Antarctica around 90 million years ago. Fossil remnants of this forest were discovered on the ocean floor and the Amundsen Sea off the coast of West Antarctica. The significance of the find lies largely in its location, as 90 million years ago this West Antarctic forest would have been a mere 560 miles from the then South Pole. Ulrich Salzman, a professor of paleoecology and paleoclimatology at the Northumbria University in the UK, commented, "The numerous plant remains indicate that 93 to 83 million years ago, the coast of West Antarctica was swampy landscape in which temperate rainforests grew, similar to the forests that can still be found, say, on New Zealand's South Island. In order for such a landscape of dense vegetation to have existed in Antarctica, there would have had to have been little or no ice sheet present, and carbon dioxide levels would need to have been higher than previously thought." And this exactly is what scientists now believe was the case 90 million years ago on the continent. Antarctica continues to provide the scientific world with surprises, which must surely mean they have to constantly update many of their theories about its history and prehistory. Who knows what other revelations about this strange continent lie in wait?
A land of ice at our southern pole has begun to melt, and claims of secrets that have become exposed leak and flow from its shores like the water from its melting ice. The alleged threat of alien bases and secret experiments could end all life on Earth. Amongst the whispers from the frozen tundra comes a new theory with global implications that will affect us all. Planet Earth formed over 4.5 billion years ago from various solar material to eventually create a very remarkable biosphere, which has seen life grow from the smallest to the biggest and the smartest life as we, the human race, have ever known. This blue marble, as seen from the void of space, is as beautiful off the planet as it is on it. But life on the planet is not as picturesque as our cameras may portray. Every day is a struggle, and life must end for other lives to continue. However, there have been occasions in Mother Earth's history, instead of nurturing her offspring and cultivating their development, she chose to murder her children en masse. It's estimated that 5 planet-wide extinction events have already occurred. The first was 444 million years ago, which seen 86% of all species alive on the planet wiped out, probably triggered by the uplift of the Appalachian mountain range now in the USA, sucking huge amounts of CO2 from the atmosphere due to the exposed silicate rock, which sent the planet into a short but severe ice age. The second was 375 million years ago, which saw the loss of 75% of the planet's species, probably caused by the rise of land from the oceans, promoting algae blooms which sucked oxygen from the water. The third, 250 million years ago, nearly sterilized the planet. 96% of all life died according to the textbooks, due mostly to a cataclysmic eruption near Siberia. Huge amounts of greenhouse gases rose the planet's temperature and acidified the oceans. The fourth occurred 200 million years ago, where we find evidence of serpentine creatures on the planet with no jaws, but mouths and throats filled with remarkable teeth. One such creature was found in 1980 in Scotland called a conodont, but no cause was ever found for their extinction. The fifth we are mostly all familiar with, and happened 66 million years ago, resulting in 76% of life on the planet being wiped out during the age of the great lizards. An asteroid impact in the Gulf of Mexico was the final nail in the coffin for the dinosaurs, who were already suffering from volcanic aftermath and climate change. Over the last 300,000 years, humans have been climbing the proverbial tree of the dominant species to make an impact on this planet. But 2 areas of the Earth have avoided our direct interference due to their harshness. Our technology has helped us explore both above and below the surface of the Earth, tapping into resources which have been deemed useful to growing and developing nations and those wishing to remain dominant. The Arctic to the north has its pole centralized on open ocean, which it is significantly smaller than its sister, the Antarctic, to the south. The Antarctic pole is focused on a landmass which delivers a very different and killer weather system, which can freeze exposed skin in seconds. Exceptionally powerful currents surround this icy continent, which separates it from the warmer waters of the Pacific, Indian, and Atlantic Oceans. Due to the South Pole being on land, it is found over 9,000 feet above sea level on the surface of the icy giant, where temperatures never rise above -12 degrees Celsius or 9 degrees Fahrenheit. The vast mountains are protected by the massive ice sheets, some several miles deep. Deadly katabatic winds that blow off the high plains thousands of feet above sea level filter into the valleys below and have reached speeds of 320 kilometers an hour or 200 miles per hour. And when combined with the lowest temperatures recorded on the planet at -94 degrees Celsius or -135 degrees Fahrenheit, this creates a deadly and highly efficient killing machine. Among all the dreadful possibilities the weather can inflict on the human body, life does strangely survive down there. Seals, penguins, whales and squid, to name a few, live in the white worlds quite comfortably. Small pockets of exposed land heated by thermal activity are sporadically found across the continent. Remarkably, on only 1% of the land that remains ice-free, there are 2 species of flowering plants, the Antarctic hairgrass and the Antarctic pearlwort can be found. The Antarctic Treaty was signed in the United States on December 1st, 1959 by 12 countries whose scientists had been stationed on the continent during the International Geophysical Year on 1957 to 1958. The treaty was enforced in 1961, with other countries adding their support, bringing it to a total of 53 world nations now supporting and recognizing the need to protect this vulnerable environment and making it one of the largest protected areas in the world at over 1 million square kilometers. At least that's the sentiment sold to us on a global scale. But what if this was not the case? What if the treaty is being held together by a thread as big players force their way into the world arena as they begin to understand the considerable amount of natural resources that lie dormant under the ice? Land and sea seizures have already taken place this century as large nations fight and struggle behind a thinning veil of media coverage to keep our questioning minds looking in another direction. What resources are available that would drive a big player to break the agreement? The ice and snow of the Antarctic seems to produce an exceptionally fruitful crop of conspiracy theories, including large pyramids, frozen civilizations, current and active alien and Nazi bases, monsters under the ice, and missing expeditions. The continent's appearance within the world stage is just as shady. There are those that suggest that the great land to the south was known before its sighting by mariners in the 1820s. Its very name, Antarctic, is a term coined by Marinus of Tyre from Syria in the 2nd century AD. Although he never saw the land, or even the ice for that matter, he used the understanding that the earth must be in balance, and if there is land in the north, then the equal must be said to the south. By the 15th century, the Great Lands began appearing again in maps known as Terra Australis, Latin for Southlands. By 1513, a Turkish mapmaker, Admiral Byrd produced a map based on alleged ancient maps. Some have assumed it outlined the Antarctic coastline and the Americas. The details within the map, known today as Perry Reese, are very detailed, but the map vanished and was only rediscovered in 1929. On examination, the midsection of the map was very accurate and seemed to resemble the central worldview perspective typical for that time period. However, the devil is in the detail, and here the map lets us down. Other sources have claimed that the Perry Reese map also accurately depicts the unfrozen shoreline of the Antarctic, which has been under ice for millions of years. This is not the case. You can see the overlay of the Perry Reese map in pink against how we know the Earth is today, and we can see the North America section is not represented properly, and the reliability of the South America section drops away significantly. With the destruction of the Piri Reis map put behind us, we can now start to move on to more modern mysteries. Before the Antarctic Treaty was signed, the military establishment had already moved in. In 1928, Admiral Byrd had started the first of many expeditions to the polar region, culminating in the first of Operation Deep Freeze, which today we are led to believe is an ongoing defense support to civilian authorities in Antarctica. Defensive support, you say? From what? A possible attack from pesky and cunning penguins? Following the Operation Deep Freeze in 1955, other countries began utilizing the pockets of ice-free zones in the region, building bases designed to be more long-term. Admiral Byrd's now infamous expedition to the Antarctic, called Operation High Jump, ended some 6 months early due to worsening weather conditions, and consisted of 4,700 men, 13 ships, and 33 aircraft. Byrd was alleged to have made a series of cryptic comments during an interview with news correspondent Lee Van Atta aboard the USS Mount Olympus, which later appeared in a Chilean newspaper called El Mercurio. Admiral Byrd declared today that it was an imperative for the United States to initiate immediate defense measures against hostile regions. The Admiral further stated that he didn't want to frighten anyone unduly, but that it was a bitter reality that in case of a new war, the continental United States would be attacked by flying objects, which could fly from pole to pole at incredible speeds. Admiral Byrd repeated the above points of view, resulting from his personal knowledge gathered both at North and South Poles, before a news conference held for International News Service. It seems that there may have been something lost in translation between English and Spanish, as the original article reads, Byrd warns US to guard against enemy attacks from polar regions. Aboard USS Mount Olympus en route home from Antarctica, March the 5th, Rear Admiral Richard E. Byrd warned today that the United States must guard against any future invasions by hostile aircraft from across the polar regions of the Earth. It seems the Admiral's aspirations at establishing a new base in Antarctica at a time of increasing Soviet distrust became embroiled with a fictional book released years later called The Hollow Earth, the greatest geographical discovery in history made by Admiral Richard E. Byrd in the mysterious land beyond the poles. A book written by Walter Siegmeister. A lot of the fictional storylines from this book and others just like it have led to a cloud of thick conspiracy when there really was none. Well, at least as far as aliens went anyway in 1947. Rather, it was about getting a foothold in the best parts of the Antarctic region before other nations began developing it. It was understood early on during the military and scientific expeditions that the electromagnetic variations at the poles could affect global weather conditions. It has been claimed the original Kemp Sky High on the Antarctic Peninsula was used to stimulate aurora effects. Harry Wexler was chief scientist to the United States Antarctic Team in 1958, before the treaty was signed a year later. He allegedly detailed a study to alter planetary-scale weather manipulation using short and long-term radiation, and proposed induction of worldwide planet change called The Possibility of Climate Control, released in 1962. Experiments carried out in the Antarctic region bombarded part of the atmosphere with chlorine and bromine, which destroyed part of the boundary layer of ozone. This natural planetary safety barrier acts as a filter for the shorter wavelength and highly hazardous ultraviolet radiation from the sun, protecting life on Earth from its potentially harmful effects. It was also alleged in early August 1963 a nuclear weapons launch was made from the Antarctic, probably designed to enhance radio propagation in the stratosphere, allowing global radio signal transfer around the planet, whereas today we use the more modern and reliable satellite technology. Surely details such as these are what drives the story surrounding the icy continent. Strangely, if we examine the idea of heating the planet and the decade in which those experiments were said to have been carried out, we found a correlation between the experiments and a sharp rise thereafter of the planet's temperature. Throw in the idea that we are left with a hole in the ozone layer, and we are left wondering what actually did go on down there, and how the children are left to pay for the sins of the parents. So far in this documentary, we have been trying to maneuver our way through the truth and misdirection, but the Antarctic is not without its true mysteries. It seems UFOs have been reported in the Antarctic since our serious involvement with the continent. A Freedom of Information request disclosed reported sightings at least since the 5th of July 1965. A group of red, green and yellow UFOs have been seen flying over Deception Island for 2 hours. It seems Argentinian, Chilean and British bases reported these flying lights over their bases and were also reported flying in tight circles over the South Orkney Islands. Reports of strange lights are nothing new for the Antarctic continent, but there is a divisive element within superior authorities serving on the continent to keep those reports quiet. During the summer season of 1995 to 1996, a member of a US military flight crew claimed on at least 2 separate flights to have witnessed silver disc-shaped objects hovering and performing flight maneuvers over the Transantarctic mountain range, a series of peaks that splits the continent from east to west. There are a series of magnetic anomalies surrounding the continent, with one being concentrated on the edge of the Vostok Mountains, and this one in particular, where the anomalies would most likely appear within the Transantarctic range. These anomalies are also littered around the planet, and through steady research it has shown the Vostok anomaly in particular would be the most likely location of the sightings, and like with other strange anomalies, would also possess unusual phenomena including UFO sightings and abductions. Stronger anomalies are also found along the western edges of the continent, with one extending from the Walker Mountains to Davis Coast and the East Base Research Station, and another stretching from the Walgreen Coast southeast toward the South Pole. These anomalies are found in other locations around the planet, such as Skinwalker Ranch and the Brown Mountain Lights in the United States, Hisdalen Lights in Norway, and the famous A70 abduction case in Scotland in 1992, for example. Missing people in such harsh conditions would be more common if more people could afford the $78,000 round-trip ticket, but as it is, we just have a scattering of reports leaking from those stationed there. During the 1994 to 1995 summer, a group of scientists were alleged to have vanished, but finding any information on people who may have gone missing or died on the continent is exceptionally difficult. However, we do know of a strange case of Carl Robert Deitch in 1965. He was an ionospheric physicist who vanished whilst working at the Byrd research station. Carl left the radio noise building at 9:15 a.m. on the morning of the 8th of May 1965. He was heading for the main station complex to the south. The buildings were linked throughout the complex by a hand line to provide guidance during whiteout storms. By 11:30 a.m., the search was initiated, and the trail was found leading west for about 4 miles. One report suggested there was no noticeable lessening of his stride, and eventually the search was called off on May the 14th. No sight or sound of Carl was ever found since. Was this just a case of losing his way within the snow? He did have a handrail to guide him, but he obviously didn't use it. There have been other unsubstantiated reports that strange lights were also seen in the area of his disappearance, and a strange hum similar to those heard all over the planet, like a diesel generator in the distance. And shortly after his disappearance, his own husky Gus also vanished without a trace. The old Byrd station was constructed in the middle of the Walgreen anomaly, but due to the nature of secrecy pertaining to experimental programs being conducted down there, any further details are not forthcoming. In the Antarctic summer season of 2002 to 2003, a story was blasted onto the internet through an Australian website. The world was amazed to learn of the disappearance of a Californian television crew who went missing in the Antarctic tundra. The breaking story stated the crew were investigating archaeological remains which had been discovered of a former major complex of ancient structures. It seems during the live broadcast the entire crew were attacked by some unknown assailants and the live feed was cut. A team of Navy SEALs were dispatched to the location and the tapes were retrieved, and the US government has held them since. The Californian company have been pursuing legal proceedings against the government to obtain their property. Sadly, none of the cast or crew were ever recovered. A series of coordinates were released to the web attempting to locate the precise location of the filming and the city, which was exposed to the environment. The more I looked into the story, the more it began to leak water. The difficulty of beaming a live stream from the Antarctic in that period would have been littered with problems such as equipment and battery failures, never mind the sheer expense of getting the equipment to the continent in the first place. The small company known as Atlantis TV would have to have initially produced millions of dollars up front before even getting feet onto the ground, and this alone would have placed a huge stumbling block in their way at exposing any ancient ruin. But wait, if indeed a live feed was cut, what tapes do the Navy SEALs then hold? When delving into the history of the company, I found no such television company existed with the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission. During the crew's alleged disappearance, Blair Witch had just been released several years earlier and grossed $225 million. Between 1996 and 2006, 8 more found footage-style movies tried to follow in the success of the Blair Witch. From the evidence at hand, it certainly suggests that this tantalizing story of found footage was nothing more than a hoax, a film script plot that didn't even make it off the ice. Prior to 1957, Russian scientists selected a location in southeast Antarctica, above Lake Vostok, to build and maintain a base in one of the coldest areas of the continent. Temperatures could and did drop to as low as minus 89 degrees Celsius or minus 128 Fahrenheit, and the team were faced with a multitude of obvious difficulties. Lake Vostok is one of the largest freshwater lakes on the continent, stretching 160 miles and 30 miles across at its widest point. Buried under 2.4 miles of ice, the lake remained ice-free due to geothermal energy. In 1989, scientists began to drill a well to reach the lake. Funding shortages, equipment failures, environmental concerns, and severe cold all took their toll on the project, slowing it down considerably. But the team in February 2012, led by Valery Lukin, the head of Russia's Arctic and Antarctic Research Institute, AARI, released a statement that they had finally reached the lake. The story, however, takes a strange twist. For in September 2012, a defecting Russian scientist from the team fled to Geneva in Switzerland, where he recounted a remarkable story how they descended in wetsuits into the icy water of Lake Vostok, only to be attacked by a creature which had remained bound by the ice. The creature, which turned out was a giant squid, became known as Organism 46B, and could morph and contort itself into different appearances and release a venom which was effective at over 150 feet to paralyze its prey, which included some of the scientific party. Its level of intelligence was similar to our own and could outmaneuver the scientific team. Finally, after a life-and-death struggle, we were led to believe the creature was outmaneuvered and captured before being brought to the surface, along with the remaining and surviving scientific team. The defecting scientist, Dr. Anton Padalka, fled Russia as he apparently didn't like the fact that Russia intended to weaponize the squid for its own purposes, and his conscience would not allow him to proceed with the project. The problem we faced was that the story was shared across multiple internet platforms, and in 2017 it hit an all-time high, with videos popping up everywhere relaying the truth and apparent cover-up of the Russian scientists. The origins of the story and regarding the fantastic Russian breakthrough in finally reaching the lake were indeed true. However, the tall tale of a defecting scientist was not. It was created in September 2012 by a writer who wrote for the Weekly World News, a largely fictional news tabloid published in the United States. The story was later picked up and spread throughout other websites and tabloid newspapers like an invasive weed. The success of the Russian scientists to finally break through to the ice and the lake resulted in them returning a barrel full of water which was previously sealed from the rest of the world for more than 20 million years. As soon as it was retrieved, the pressure from the lake forced water up the well shaft and froze the hole again, sealing it from modern-day pollutants. From 1989, within the world of comic books, readers were tantalized by rumors of a horrific story about two alien life forms that arrive on a planet which becomes an arena for the two species to fight to the death. The two species, Yatja and Xenomorph XX121, we have come to know as Predator and Alien, and each would have their very own successful movie franchise. However, due to the Dark Horse comic publication number 35 in February 1990, this first crossover franchise led to the two species finally meeting on our screens, culminating in a fight-to-the-death scenario written and directed by Paul Anderson. The 2004 film was inspired by Aztec mythology and grossed over $172 million worldwide. Set on an island 1,000 miles off the coast of Antarctica, A wealthy and somewhat nosy industrialist, Charles Whelan, discovers a thermal signature buried 2,000 feet beneath the ice. Assembling a team, they discover an ancient pyramid under the ice with the help, of course, from the Predator ship that fires a laser from orbit through the ice and allows them to reach the pyramid and discover evidence of a prehistoric civilization. The rest, as they say, is history. The idea of pyramids hidden under the snow and ice in the Arctic is just as old as the movie itself, and some may say just as cheesy. These stories have been travelling around the web for more than 10 years, and some have been developing their own gravity in regards to their weight of believability. I could easily say one such pyramid exists in Ireland, which can be seen from miles away before it vanishes into the mist of the Atlantic rainfronts. This place was also associated with the old serpent gatekeepers to the world of the gods, and over 8 tons of gold that's kept safe under the mysterious place. However, it turns out it's just a mountain, Croagh in County Mayo. One of the original articles, which describes the Antarctic pyramid discovery, didn't list any names of those within the expedition team, and no facts could be followed up. Like before with the story of Organism 46B, those wishing to be in the front of breaking news never fact-checked their stories, which were then fired from a cannon across the web. One report from September 2012 suggests 2 of the pyramid structures were found approximately 10 miles inland, while the third was very close to the coastline, but photos supplied to support the articles were sourced from other sites with no connection to pyramids. The Antarctic pyramid phenomena was on the decline when a Spanish paranormal investigator who writes for ufotopia.com posted an image of a supported pyramid and released a Spanish-language documentary on the discovery in 2016. Giving the coordinates, we can clearly see what attracted his attention to the Schatz Ridge near the Sentinel Range, but sadly it turns out to be nothing more than a nunatak. A nunatak, or glacial horn, simply is an exposed, often rocky element of a ridge or a mountain peak that was exposed to the elements and not covered with ice or snow, which leads to natural erosion to form a natural pyramidal peaks seen elsewhere around the planet. The stories that surround the Antarctic are plenty and bountiful. The icy landscape has become a breeding ground of misinformation and distraction. It's a land which can be exploited only due to the expense of exploration and the dangers involved. Not unlike the Western world, we can usually find a lodging of some sort after a day's travel, but here in the Antarctic, in a land larger than the mainland United States, there are no hotels, no rental cars, no roads or forests. There seems to be 3 types of information leaving the coldness of the South Pole. The official data, which can be read readily in scientific journals. Another is hearsay from personnel stationed there. Here we have a problem. Whether a person is a scientist, military, or civilian contractor, we tend to get lost in the credentials and hand over all our senses of reason. For instance, it seems within the UFO field, we love to have a witness who has a credible background and take their word as gospel. When police officers, airline pilots, military representatives report seeing something odd, we will accept their word over Joe Bloggs from the street. Why? If we consider such cases as a Baltimore police officer who accidentally recorded himself in 2017 planting drugs at a crime scene, or a judge in Guatemala convicted of taking bribes, a Navy SEAL charged with molestation, and a scientist who pleaded guilty to falsifying HIV vaccine test results. One common factor is that they all have impeccable history, but they all can lie like anyone else. We need to keep our feet firmly on the ground when dealing with reports of paranormal and supernatural phenomena. The final example of information said to come from the Antarctic are from people who have never been there, and I am one of them. The closest I have been to the continent was when I visited Christchurch in New Zealand and Cape Town in South Africa. Within these reports there tends to be a paper trail if we can only take the time to follow, and this is our downfall. We rarely take the time to follow the breadcrumbs. We have become complacent and rely on others to tell us what is going on in the world. Our reality has sped up so fast the majority cannot follow the breadcrumbs, and this makes it easy for such conspiracy theories to break through into the mainstream. I have no wish to go to the Antarctic continent. As I can see from the number of magnetic anomalies, the strange activity would be less than those seen, for instance, in the mainland United States or Europe. So for now, I have to leave the pesky penguins where they are, and within as little as 50 years they will have developed opposable thumbs and build a mega base on the bones of the old Nazi submarine pen built near the end of World War II. I wonder will I read about this theory in another decade.